Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about what if Naruto x Aizen Bleach part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. I must. He staggered. Stopping, and leaning on one leg, he gasped in shock when the sharp pain ripped through it, yet he moved on. Haste was the order of the day. Must leave. A huge gash ran across the left side of his parched and cracked lips. Blood had already dried around it, the flaky outer layers already peeling off. Two other cuts seemed to adorn his gaunt face, each running quite a distance across it. Dusk was settling in. The young boy could tell by the way the sun was slowly submerging itself amidst the trees on the west side of Konohagakure. The wind was certainly picking up, and the young boy shivered, lacking any sufficient protection from the cold. Making him feel comfortable was the least of the villagers' worries. All they cared about was to leave him alone between violent outbursts of anger so that his unnatural, cursed healing ability got him well enough for another. The young boy limped along, weary and melancholic, two adjectives that didn't have anything to do with a boy his age. The village itself, though, was in a state of inebriated joy. The 10th of October, a day that always signified both great joy and great sorrow, the joy that the nine-tailed fox had been defeated, sorrow that it hadn't been killed, as, the villagers stated every opportunity they got, it should have been. Uzumaki Naruto limped dazedly, not caring where he was hobbling off to, as long as it meant that he was putting a sizable distance between him and his oppressors. He needn't have worried though. Beating a little boy into submission, rendering him both mentally and physically broken, now held not the original amusement it had provided for the commoners of the Leaf. Satisfied with their noble work, the men had swaggered off, deserving of a few drinks after the service they'd done for their beloved village. Have to go to. He stopped short, unable to walk further. Drawing in a breath, he bent down, clutching his right leg. It seemed to throb with every step he took, and it only kept getting worse. He couldn't carry on much longer, telling himself it didn't hurt, when it felt like 1,000 knives were working their way up his legs and into his weak thighs. Torn right thigh muscle. Uzumaki Naruto, at age 10, was no stranger to physical injuries administered by his dear fellow villagers. In fact, he was so well acquainted with the various cuts and bruises running across his pallor that they didn't even hurt now. The thing was, this time it had mattered when his right leg had come under high duress. He looked up and frowned. 44. 44, such an ominous number, a signal that things would always go wrong. It was fitting, however, to have that number designate this certain segment of the village. The Forest of Death. He stared at the thick steel netting that separated him and the dense overgrowth. Unbending, unyielding, the aptly named forest was where the Chunin exams were held once every 4 years. At other times, it remained a forbidden territory, ravaged as it was by the fierce battles for survival that took place during each iteration of the tournament designed to prove each village's supremacy over the other. The land needed healing, so they said. Walking alongside the tall steel fence, he ran his hand across the bars. Continuing for quite some time, he suddenly stopped at a certain point. Poking the fence timidly, he got the desired reaction when it bent just a fraction more than it should have, a weak link giving way, just a little. He smiled, despite the pain. Bending down, he punched the fence. It seemed to break only at that point. It flapped in and out harmlessly. Pushing the flap, he crawled his way through. The flap was a really small one, made for him, Naruto thought, on these types of days, when the villagers were feeling a bit too exuberant and were in the ideal mood to punish something in their joy. Crawling in, he stood up, wincing at the pain. This time, when he stared at the fence, it was from the inside. He turned around, coming face to face with the huge, rather imposing forest, with a dark ominous green aura surrounding it. At least, that was what anyone else would describe it as. Uzumaki Naruto simply hobbled in. What do you say to this, ye useless villagers? Being the beaten down fucker of the village never felt better. Fucker. A new word, only recently added to his growing vocabulary of such colorful language. In his opinion, the villagers seemed to call him that freely enough when he was around, and a whole bunch of other interesting sounding words that he'd yet to try. What a start to the big day, Naruto. Calmly making his way through the dense vegetation, Naruto sighed. To him, this atmosphere, this thick rich scent of soil did more wonders than a soothing balm on a searing wound. This was what he craved for. Every time he'd been ostracized, this still, calm air, the silence, punctuated by the sound of the ever so sparse breeze that made its way unwittingly through the green cover. He walked for a bit, turning here and there, following an extremely crude natural path. The darkness was starting to magnify, yet the blonde-haired little boy seemed to know where to go, and how to get there. Finally, sighing heavily, he reached his destination. A lone spot, just as big as a small room, yet so comforting. It was unique, this place. Promptly dropping to the ground, he felt himself hit a sort of soft pillow, made out of leaves and moss on the bark. Tilting his head obliquely, he could spy the moon, a full, bright moon in all its resplendence, as it traversed its ascent. It was rather ironic that the very forest that spelled doom for the villagers would be a refuge for him. Finally, some peace. The peaceful moment was, however, disturbed, and rather harshly at that. An uncharacteristic squeak made its way out of Uzumaki Naruto's larynx. Make no mistake, Naruto never really got the time to squeak all that often, and yet, there were times and occasions that demanded squeaks like these, rather loud and shock-inducing. Occasions like these, when Naruto could clearly see the visage of a man, battered and broken, physically no better off than he was, yet eyes open, and looking at him with clouded interest. Holy fuck! Uzumaki Naruto saw the man open his mouth. His lips too, caked with blood, moved. He shifted a little, his mangled body strewn over the underbrush. That's not a very nice thing to say, young man. The first thing Uzumaki Naruto registered was the man's voice. He didn't know how long this man had lain here, alone and unattended, nor did he know how he got here in the first place, nor why he was here. All that didn't seem to matter. They simply receded to the back of Naruto's mind when he heard this man's voice. A slow smile formed on the blonde Jinchuriki's lips, though he himself couldn't fathom the reason for his amusement. All he knew was that very, very few people used that tone when they addressed the blonde-haired Jinchuriki, and the fact that he was being addressed such seemed to fill him with some sort of inane joy, some inexplicable gratitude to this man for simply talking to him. They hate you too? Naruto didn't know what made him ask the question, yet, looking at this man, with his careless brown hair slipping over his, he thought, a rather hollow face, which certainly had the makings of a certain gentlemanly charm, with weary yet intrigued hazel-colored eyes, and body slumped against the tree trunk in tired resignation, a strange tingle went up the 10-year-old's spine. Belatedly, Naruto noted two things. A blood-stained hiyori cloaked the man's injured frame, but more importantly, Naruto could spy an absolutely beautiful-looking sword in the man's right hand. He was holding it like a lover holds his beloved's hand, a gentle grip, almost caressing it. Naruto realized that the man seemed unable to reply, and reiterated. They hate you too? Overcast skies blot out the sun, and that always brings people's spirits down. So why not let the sun shine just a little longer? He looked straight into the little boy's eyes, and a slow, yet placating smile tugged at the corners of his barren lips. Yes, young man, yes, they do hate me. The boy's eyes widened in surprise, and he felt even more amused at the boy's surprise. Slowly lifting his hands, willing himself to do so, even against the numbing pain, he waved for the little boy to come closer. They do hate. The boy seemed to scoot closer to him, though he knew not why. After all, he was a man, and merely a stranger to the boy. Not to mention, he was grasping his katana like a drowning man held a piece of driftwood. But it didn't seem to matter, as the boy drew even closer. For Uzumaki Naruto, time seemed to stop still when the stranger brought his raised hand forward. A strange sensation filled his stomach, as he felt the man's rough fingers make contact with the gash on his face, caressing the wound so foolishly inflicted on the unknowing little boy. Sousuke Aizen smiled, wholeheartedly, for the first time in a long, long while, and for the first time, Uzumaki Naruto saw someone smile that smile at him. They do hate, and yet. Naruto brought his shoulders together, trying to draw in as much warmth as the sensation could provide. No, not the warmth one craves when the cold starts seeping through the skin. No, not that one at all. The warmth of being acknowledged, the warmth that emanates from the sun in one's solar plexus, when the realization that someone is actually in the same despicable, despondent predicament that you are in, hits home. It filled him with a boundless joy. He was not alone. And yet, shall we give them a reason, young man? Tired cerulean eyes met tired hazel brown. Shall we give them a reason to hate us? A new dawn broke out over the hidden village of Konoha. Sarutobi Hiruzen awoke with the first rays of the sun, and rubbed his eyes with his palm. Slowly swinging his legs over, he got up painfully. His rheumatism had only gotten worse with time, but there was really nothing to be done. Age had finally caught up with the great man. He moved slowly, as if the very agility that made him Hokage had now deserted him. He reached the sink and turned on the tap. He washed his face, his hands feeling the wrinkled skin. He was no longer fit to remain a village leader, but lack of a suitable replacement had forced him to come out of retirement and take care of his village once more. After his ablutions, he went over to the window overlooking the entire country of fire. The lush landscape stretched out in front. The village wall surrounded the buildings in a rough circle, and after that, the forest, like a green carpet, protected the village and maintained its hidden status. It was a special morning, this one, as the third got his hat and placed it on his head. He looked into the mirror and saw melancholy eyes staring back. It's Naruto's birthday today, his 13th. The blonde Jinchuriki had always been full of surprises, pranks and general misbehavior, but what had shocked Hiruzen on that fateful day, 3 years ago, was the stunning change that had come over his disciple's son. All the cares of the world seemed to be burdening the young boy's azure eyes, like a veteran from the Third Great Shinobi War, who'd seen the unspeakable happen. The changes did not stop there. He'd become extremely polite, sometimes frustratingly amiable. All the insults, humiliations, violence, swearing that used to deeply hurt the little boy now simply slid off him, like water off a waxy fig leaf. He simply nodded graciously, accepting even the most heinous and cruel insults the villagers threw at him. This only served to anger them more, and they soon turned to actual physical violence. He even bears the pain, ever so stoically on many occasions. Sarutobi himself had to go and rescue the boy from the hands of the wrathful villagers, and had found him close to death, bleeding and battered. The healing power the Kyuubi had so grudgingly granted him helped, but there were some wounds that could not be healed. However, one thing, Hiruzen found that always unsettled him. Every time, although he must be in great pain, as was evident from his injuries, Uzumaki Naruto never contorted his face into the obvious agony he was going through. Every time, the same smile would adorn his scarred visage, the same smile would play on his dried and bloody lips, the same smile, not one of contempt, not one of malice, not one of joy, not one of amusement. Just a smile. And that smile, it was that very smile which always shook Hiruzen to the depths of his soul. It was almost as if the troubled young boy had suddenly found an outlet, an answer to all his problems, like some sort of guardian who would come to his aid. The Sandaime slowly ascended the granite steps of the inner corridor, making his way to his office on the top floor. Some of the Uchiha had taken to escorting the Jinchuriki wherever he went, protecting him from physical harm from hecklers and the occasional drunk peacefully, but firmly. Naruto had mildly protested at first, but they insisted on being his bodyguards. Funny, how the always secluded Uchiha would take to the boy so well, Hiruzen thought. The clan of the Sharingan claimed that the boy had got more than his fair share of beatings, and hence the Konoha police force was giving him all-round-the-clock protection. Let them do as they please, Hiruzen had accepted the Uchiha's claim at face value, ignoring Danzo's urgent warnings that this may be a plot to bring Naruto over to their side, and host a coup d'état sometime soon, with the power of the Kyuubi to assist them in their endeavors to bring down the seat of authority in the village. Hiruzen had denied all this, of course, for the sake of peace. This is what the police force was formed for, he told Danzo that day. If they want to protect Naruto, who am I to stop them? Hiruzen had seen a lot more, but he had just things go on unaltered. My role as the Hokage is to protect the will of fire, and to keep Konoha peaceful, he thought, remembering the Shodai's insistent teachings, and unwilling to take any decision, however unwise, to maintain the status quo. He entered his office. It was sparsely furnished, and was exactly like the first and the second had kept it in their days. He saw the clock on the wall, slowly ticking away. It was a priceless heirloom, reminiscent of more turbulent times, a time that Sarutobi hoped was far behind them. Where is he? I thought I had asked him to be here after dawn. There was a knock on the door, announcing the Jinchuriki's arrival. Another thing that's changed, thought the Hokage wistfully. He'd never knocked before. The door opened slowly, and Uzumaki Naruto stepped in. Hiruzen was deeply disturbed when he saw his face. Why that face? For the ever-smiling face had gravity embedded deep inside, like a fatally injured warrior enjoying his last days having accepted the grim embrace of death. It was a face he had seen no 13-year-old make, even during the most desperate times in the Shinobi Wars. The polite demeanor, the docile, almost submissive attitude pained the third greatly. It was like Hiruzen had failed again, forsaking his vow to his disciple that fateful day, and let his cherished son turn into, well, this. Why do you never smile with actual mirth anymore, Naruto? Why do you pretend to be polite? Why? He wanted to ask desperately. Yet, he said nothing out loud. Discretion was important here. Naruto was still a child. You called for me, Sandaime-sama? Another one of his newfound habits, the extreme formality added to Sarutobi's grief. Yes, Naruto. You have become 13 today. I congratulate you on your birthday, and I have some good news to share. He paused for emphasis. Starting from today, you are eligible to take the Genin graduation test at the academy. Yes, I know. I've been preparing for the last week, said Naruto, smile never wavering at the thought of an examination. I have asked Iruka-sensei to conduct your test along with others your age, Hiruzen continued. Since you've broken contact with them over the past 3 years, this will be a good opportunity to bond with the rest of your rookie group, your future teammates. Use this to create a good impression. Yes, Sandaime-sama. I suggest you leave for the academy forthwith. The tests are starting in 20 minutes, so you have plenty of time. Yes. Excuse me, Naruto bowed deeply, and exited the room without a sound. A single tear fell from the old Hokage's eyes. Forgive me, Minato, Kushina, for I have failed again. Hiruzen was not in the mood, but he took out the heap of reports from his desk, with a heart that had plummeted during his brief encounter with the changed Jinchuriki. For Yamanaka Ino, the day began just like the previous one. She awoke, jumped out of her bed, and gave her training dummy a solid punch, right in the groin. The horribly battered dummy had Uchiha Sasuke's face mask on it. How dare you, Sasuke! This had been her standard wake-up procedure for the last month, ever since that freaking scene at the restaurant. How could you cheat on me with that stupid wide-forehead bitch? Ugh. Ino whacked the dummy's head off with a heavy roundhouse kick. She was too angry to even say that whore's name. She vowed revenge for the 30th time, and finally took a few deep breaths, trying to calm herself. For some reason, it wasn't working today. She was just getting more worked up. Probably because of what happened the previous night. She'd seen them near Ichiraku's, in a secluded spot she herself had found, totally making out. Sasuke, you bastard! She thought, probably for the 1000th time, and she had just woken up. She got into the bathtub, and fumed silently in the hot water. It would have been fine if her ex-boyfriend had simply broken up with her properly, before going out with the pink bitch, but no. He just had to leave her on their 6-month anniversary date, which she meticulously prepared for the whole night. To top that, the way he broke up was just as exasperating. Their date was going fine, when stupid Pinky showed up, wide forehead and all. Her boyfriend just stared at her for a long time, and before Ino could ask him what was wrong, he just stood up, said goodbye, walked over to the pink bitch's table, bent down, and fucking kissed her. In the middle of their date. Rain, thunder, and the melancholic sound of broken violin strings. If that was not enough, he'd dumped Ino in the restaurant with a further word, and had taken off with the pink boyfriend stealer, crushing Ino's heart severely. I'll never forgive him for this. Ino realized that in her anger, she'd accidentally released chakra into the water, bringing it to a boil. She got out hastily, dried herself, and selected the most seductive dress from her collection. Oh, it was a doozy, with strategic cuts perfectly revealing skin where it should be, yet concealing just enough for the imagination. I'll show you, you little shit! I'll show you what you'll never get again, even in a million years. Ino planned on making Sasuke beg for her mercy, at her feet. At the Genin graduation, she planned to handing his manhood back on a silver platter. Ino! Get ready quick! You're going to be late. Her father's voice rang out from the flower shop downstairs. She quickly dressed, and headed for the academy. Sasuke, you'd better fucking watch out for yourself. Inside the academy building, a fair number had already arrived. She saw Naro Shikamaru skulking near the wall, disinterested in everything but his own stupid problems. Ino was a good 15 minutes early. Sasuke and the Pinky weren't here yet. Oh, I'll get you, so bad, she thought. 5 minutes later, the celebrity couple arrived, hand in hand. Sasuke was wearing the blue sweater and cream shorts Ino herself had selected. Of all the nerve. Clinging to Sasuke's hand, like a lizard, was the pink no. She's Sakura. Ino forced herself to say her name mentally. She acknowledged her bitter enemy. I'll get you too. I'll widen that forehead so much that even a scarf won't help cover it up. Ino noticed a sudden lull in the conversation. Everybody was staring at the door, mouths agape. She stopped raging over Sasuke, and looked at who was at the door. Her world stopped dead. Uzumaki Naruto had just entered the building. More rain and thunder. Uzumaki Naruto. It had been 3 years since she'd seen him last, since that October, when he'd suddenly disappeared on the 10th, with no reason given by the elders for his sudden departure. Searches had been strangely cancelled, by the Hokage himself, and the third had said that Naruto was in safe hands. The entire class had just forgotten the blonde boy, and life had just gone on. As no one had heard of him or seen him for 3 long years, nobody was prepared for this at all, especially the girls in the class. Hyuga Hinata was keeping to the corner, avoiding attention, too shy to talk to anybody. Her usual conversations had so many of her own stammering interruptions that the other person simply got bored and fucked off whenever she tried to talk to anyone. I hope Naruto-kun comes. Ever since he'd saved her from those miscreants on that day, she'd fallen for him. Somehow, her addled brain completely ignored the inappropriateness of crushing on someone at the tender age of 8. But well, clichés abounded in this little village. She admired him from a distance, never even having a normal conversation with him. For then the spell would be broken and the magical 2-horned unicorn would emerge, shitting rainbows and granting wishes. Exiting preteen fantasy. Return to normalcy complete. The heiress to the Hyuga clan was the only one who'd actually felt sad that Naruto had disappeared. She had cried silently in her room, desperately praying for him to be safe, while the rest of Konoha reveled at the riddance of the fox boy, and every time she'd hear them talk, open their mouths and utter those words, each time their tongues rolled in their mouths to curse the boy, she would grit her teeth. She would close her eyes, shutting herself out from the blatant violation of the fact that humans couldn't sink to such low levels of despondence. So, naturally, her heart leapt for joy at the sight of her beloved, and it jumped just high enough for a slam dunk when she saw his new look. Some more rain, thunder, and just a little light violin symphony. For the Jinchuriki was no longer the clumsy, disheveled boy from all those years ago. He was dressed very handsomely indeed. He wore black jeans that fit perfectly, and a black undershirt. His orange jacket was left unzipped at the front to show a very fit, muscular torso. He was wearing a silver chain around his neck. The only part of his visage that looked unkempt was his blonde hair. He now wore it much longer than before, with a spiky fringe partly hiding the teal eyes underneath. And the eyes. Oh God! Hinata's heart, too, plunged upon seeing his eyes. Sure, they were that shade, that distinctive shade of cerulean that could only color Uzumaki Naruto's eyes, but that wasn't the point. What really hit her, made her heart drop, was the fact that they looked sullen. Apart from that, he looked nice, with a clean, confident aura around him. He had changed drastically, from being the uncouth, rowdy boy she'd fallen in love with, all those years ago. He's mine, a rare moment of conclusion for the hesitant Hyuga heir. No matter what the cost. Uchiha Sasuke was in a dire predicament. He had no clue how to even appear in front of Ino, who he'd shamelessly dumped. In my defense, he thought, she had been getting boring. 6 months with the same girl was way beyond what the young Uchiha was willing to bear. The only reason he'd kept Sakura around for a month was her undying affection towards him, the adoration in her eyes stoking his ego. Also, it was because of his elder brother suddenly becoming cold and distant towards him, not that Sasuke would ever admit it. After he taught Sasuke to awaken his Sharingan, Itachi had seemed too busy to hang out with his younger brother anymore. Sasuke had been trying to fill up his time with girlfriends, as his lessons were too easy, but that too was so goddamn boring after a few days. It wasn't his fault that the lessons were boring, though. The instructors had decided, apparently, that knowing the tangential component of velocity of a kunai whizzing through the air at you was infinitely more important than knowing how to dodge the thing. Also, Sakura had gotten way too clingy of late. She submissively listened to everything Sasuke had to say, never contradicting him, totally unlike the headstrong Ino. For a short instant, Sasuke wished he was with Ino. Then his practical side kicked in. Well, there's no going back now, is there? He looked at Ino. She was staring broadswords at him. 'Cause daggers ain't and Jagger. Or is that Jaeger? Wait, that's SNK. Nope, definitely not an option. He sighed, but soon brightened up, as a third option suggested itself to him. His senior, the vivacious Tenten, seemed available, and Sasuke was desperately looking for an opportunity to hit on her. Sadly for him, Sakura followed him wherever he went, looking at him with that sickly, cloying adoration in her eyes. He'd not got a chance yet, but he was sure he could ditch her using genjutsu, whenever the fucking Aizen found the time to teach it to him. He too noticed the conversation in the academy fade away to silence. He looked at the door. Seeing him there made him forget his P.R. Eddie girl problems for a while. Uzumaki Naruto had decided to return. Wow, he's grown. Sasuke's bored mind relished the thought of resuming their sparring, for, after all, he was an Uchiha, an elite, someone who would be far ahead of the rest in terms of pure combative ability, and the rest of them, the Inuzuka, the Aburame, the Yamanaka, gulp, none of them were up to par, not in the very least. Of course, there was always the Hyuga, but the girl had never struck him as anything much, quite overhyped, he thought, by the way the clan elders seemed to talk about their dojutsu-wielding rivals. And all of that only left one result, one conclusion. Uzumaki Naruto's skills were the only ones which weren't evaluated so far. Heavy rain and thunder accompanying a random death metal number from Opeth. Bring it on, faggot! It was as if someone had turned the volume up a few notches. Uchiha Sasuke could feel the distinct buzzing that welcomed Uzumaki Naruto's entrance. Black jeans, black undershirt, and a carelessly zipped-up orange jacket that did less to hide his surprisingly well-developed torso, the blonde-haired boy had certainly caught the eye of just about every girl in class, if not the boys. Some of the surprised pregenins had almost begun salivating at the sight of the blonde. Control yourselves, niggas. He observed the surprised entrant. Uzumaki Naruto was turning away from him, looking at someone else, most probably. He could see the spiky blonde hair extending now to the back of his neck, and the broad shoulders the neck was attached to. Sasuke decided to challenge the new kid, meeting Naruto's eyes when he turned back to face him. The buzzing seemed to intensify. The new extremely good-looking boy was looking at the already known extremely good-looking boy. It was every fangirl's dream come true. Sasuke, dropping Sakura's firm grip, walked forward, making sure his chest was as broad as it could possibly look. Smirking, he held out a hand, willing the blonde to shake it. He saw Uzumaki Naruto's eyes follow his outstretched hand. A curious, almost indecisive uncertainty seemed to linger in the blonde-haired boy's eyes. Uchiha Sasuke. Uzumaki Naruto nodded. Without extending his hand in return, he spoke. I'm really sorry, but are you gay? Nothing much really, but I'm pretty sure you were checking me out. Sasuke could feel the color rise to his face. He spluttered. It was as if someone had hit the mute button and swallowed the remote. The odd giggle broke the almost crushing silence. Yamanaka Ino tried, albeit unsuccessfully, to stifle her mirth. She could even see Sasuke reddening at the Uzumaki's words. It was, after all, not every day that you saw the dick humiliated, him being the class hero and all. Therefore, on the odd moment, Ino tried to relish it as much as possible. Hey! Several heads turned at Harino Sakura's outburst. Sasuke isn't gay. He's going out with me. Ino saw Naruto turn, an amicable smile playing across his face, eyes positively twinkling. And you are? I'm Sakura. But how dar. Charming. I'll talk to you later then. This time, Ino heard several others laugh too. Again, it wasn't every day you saw Harino Sakura being brushed aside, her being the smartest girl in class and all, what with the teachers literally fawning over her. Ino had to admit, though, Sakura was certainly smart, but of all things, she had a wide forehead. In Yamanaka Ino's opinion, people with wide foreheads didn't. Her train of thought came to a screeching halt, as if someone had jammed the brakes and cut off the fuel supply. Why, you ask? Can I sit here? Sweet symphony seemed to play in the background, for Yamanaka Ino. She looked up in slow motion. There he was, Uzumaki Naruto, asking her if he could sit next to her. Excuse me, but can I sit here? The piano solo kicked in now. The world was a wonderful place to live in, after all. There he was, Uzumaki Naruto, asking her to excuse him, the picture of gentlemanly charm. The symphony suddenly stopped, as if someone had played Lamb of God during the quieter sections. Wait, why was he asking her to excuse him? Oh, of course, why you can. His face broke into a wide smile, and her stomach seemed to flutter. Experts agree that stomach fluttering is a condition commonly found in acute cases of diarrhea. Romance novelists, on the other hand, think that it's a sign for the girl in question and the protagonist to get married and have 18 kids. She scooted to the side of her bench, giving the boy room to flop down carelessly. As she stole a look at the blonde, Ino couldn't help blurting out, "You've changed." He turned, looking at her. She could see a few bangs running up till his eyebrows, and yet, it didn't give him a rough, shaggy look. Instead, it looked just right, as if those bangs shouldn't be anywhere but where they were. Well, yeah, it's been 3 years after all. She nodded dazedly, partially hearing what he said. She could see the blonde hair around the sides of his neck, framing his face quite nicely, in fact. A small silver chain hung around his neck. She hastily rearranged her expression, lest she should seem weird, and answered, "Yeah." Turning around suddenly, Naruto seemed to looking around him. They were at the first bench on the far right. Pausing, Ino heard Naruto greet someone cheerily. "Hey! All right there, Hinata?" Mutinous whispering seemed to break out in the class again. First, Uzumaki Naruto had chosen to sit next to Ino. Second, he seemed to know Hyuga Hinata, the shyest girl ever, on first-name basis. The whispering came to an immediate standstill when Yumino Iruka walked in with the air of cradling an atomic bomb. The Genin tests. Uchiha Itachi wore a genial, friendly expression as he walked back to the Uchiha compound. As he walked, various people stopped and greeted him with smiling faces. Nodding, and sometimes smiling back at people, it was clear that the brilliant young Uchiha was popular among just about everyone. The morning was wearing thin, a bright sunny one, ideal for a perfect day off from the gloomy ANBU atmosphere. One of the youngest in his ANBU division, Uchiha Itachi was known for a fearfully trained sense of movement, direction, thinking and execution. On top of that, his Sharingan was said to be one of the most well-developed ones in the Uchiha clan. It was no secret that the Uchiha was a born genius, and a certain candidate for Hokage. Dressed casually in black for a change from his ANBU outfit, his thin, wiry, yet powerful frame did not go unnoticed. He was no stranger to ogling, gaping, and jealous looks as he passed by. Hair tied back in a loose ponytail, his slow measured walk gave Uchiha Itachi some much-needed time to think. He just escorted Uzumaki Naruto to school, on generally no one's orders. It was, after all, the Jinchuriki's first day at school, and even if the number of attacks on the boy had decreased, it was safe to not take any chances. Uchiha Itachi smiled, as his thoughts went toward their relationship, him and the Uzumaki. It wasn't affection, not the brotherly type, certainly. At first, it was intrigue. There was no other word for it. For if there was one thing Uchiha Itachi prided himself on, it was emotional prowess. Simply the art of masking one's emotions, even manipulating them to an extent, usually proved to be impossible for many people. And yet, for Itachi it was almost second nature. Of course, this proved to be a treasured skill indeed when he joined the ranks of the ANBU, a world set in such harsh contrast to the ones the pedestrians knew. Step into the ANBU, and suddenly it would be as if the ANBU itself took you in, embrace you with affection and sit you in its lap, proceeding with informing you of its darkest secrets. That was it, the ANBU. A world where lies were as common as a stone on the road, and secrets as abundant as the air you breathed. And of course, it helped that violence was considered as essential as breathing. Itachi knew well the heavy, twisted air of the ANBU of the leaf. And sometimes, just sometimes, he would admit to himself that it was certainly interesting. But back to Uzumaki Naruto. Uchiha Itachi was surprised to see that the very emotional strength he prided himself on was exhibited with such dexterity by a boy around half his age. He knew it, of course. He was, after all, the Sharingan genius, though nothing on his friend, the even better-known Uchiha Shisui. And they had talked for quite a while. For a time, it was simply a stranger meeting a boy every day. Just passing by, he would talk the boy out of interest, aware, of course, of the boy's status. And slowly, bit by bit, Itachi would start to look forward to the boy's meetings. It was just the snarky humor, sometimes, the startling disdain with which he would command his language that would intrigue him. That disdain was, at first, humorous to hear from someone so young, but soon, without himself realizing it, Itachi felt himself acknowledge what the boy was talking about. The disdain made sense. The boy was, indeed, a phenomenon, at least, Itachi felt, in terms of speech. And then, he'd introduced the boy to Shisui once, having brought Shisui along with him during one of strolls. And again, just like him, Shisui warmed up inexplicably to the boy. Sometimes, on his off days, the three of them would spend hours talking about anything. Itachi would explain how the ranking system in Konoha worked, how the Kage would protect the village at all costs. And sometimes, it would turn educational, with Shisui explaining Nin, Gen, Du, Ken, Sin and any other jutsu available, only in theory of course. And Itachi found the boy listening, with rapt attention, mouth hanging open and eyes wide, as Shisui would explain how Byakugan users would cleverly exploit chakra points to weaken their opponents. It would always bring a smile to his face, and a certain strange, inexplicable feeling in the pit of his stomach, the same he felt when he'd seen Sasuke for the first time, to watch the young Uzumaki listen with a near-worshipping look on his face. It wasn't just combat theory. Sometimes, Shisui would announce, it was also important to learn about history. Naruto would groan, of course, somehow convinced that history was a pile of old rubbish with old people doing old stuff. But barely a minute later, Shisui would have him hanging on to every word, telling him about Uchiha Madara's power lust, his thirst for blood, and explaining that, though skilled beyond imagination, Madara had died a humiliating death at the hands of the Shodai. Sometimes, he would even have Naruto rolling around in tears of mirth when he told him about how the Night-Dame, Tobirama Senju-sama, had declared war on Iwagakure after receiving a letter about how they'd kidnapped his wife, and readying all the battlements, only to realize that the letter had been a prank, and he didn't have a wife. And Itachi had to admit, the boy showed a commendable thirst for knowledge. He knew it wasn't to be underestimated, that certain quality. For as long as someone was willing to learn, they would always improve. And where there was a thirst to learn, there was a thirst to grow. As Naruto listened more and more to the theory, the more he persuaded them to show him what he'd learnt. But here, both Itachi and Shisui would draw a line. This boy, after all, was the Konoha Jinchuriki. The village council had, under strict orders, placed him under watch, and teaching the boy combat techniques without approval would certainly be frowned on, if not met with strict disciplinary action. And then, something wonderful had happened. One of their clan elders had happened upon their little meeting. At first, he could see the trepidation in Shisui's eyes. Their clan had received orders to not maintain contact with the Jinchuriki. As part of their police force, they should only have watched him. And now, they were discovered. It had been a strange meeting. The heavily built Uchiha Kirin stared at the young boy, and Uzumaki Naruto stared back, never breaking eye contact, never faltering even for a second. After a few seconds had passed, Naruto had got up suddenly, sensing the fact that he was sitting down in front of a clan head. My apologies, Uchiha Dano. I hope you will forgive me for my disrespect. I am Uzumaki Naruto. Itachi stared, face impassive, but anxious at heart at Uchiha Kirin. And for the first time he had ever seen in his life, Uchiha Kirin's eyes broke their usual lifeless look, and his lips split into a small grin. Pleased to meet you, Uzumaki-san. I see you are well acquainted with Itachi and Shisui. You must come to our compound for lunch sometime. Not even waiting to hear a reply, Uchiha Kirin had hobbled off, still smiling, leaving a bemused and flummoxed Shisui and Itachi. No more was spoken about the subject. Naruto never came to the proposed meal, but, as Itachi knew well, it was an extension of the hand of the Uchiha towards the lone Uzumaki. Itachi and Shisui themselves had talked about it, but there was no other explanation for it. The Uchiha had just decided to befriend the Jinchuriki, just because. And suddenly, it was no more watching the boy. It became escort. Perfectly capable of investigation, the Uchiha elders had come to realize the treatment being meted out to the boy. And protecting him from further physical and mental harm suddenly became their top priority. Now filled with confidence, Uzumaki Naruto had suddenly realized that, although what he was receiving wasn't love of any sort, but respect, acknowledgement, and most of all, importance. The two of them, Shisui and Itachi, had decided to teach the boy the basics of combat. As expected, he was clumsy, he was ignorant, and he was slow. But what made it a pleasure to teach him was that he was willing to learn. He was willing to accept that he was clumsy and slow, and ready to change it. What made teaching the Uzumaki difficult was that they couldn't be seen doing it. Naturally, lessons proceeded at snail pace. But then, the two of them had decided that training the body was enough. Naruto himself would learn if he possessed the thirst, about chakra manipulation, ninjutsu and the likes. And so, bit by noticeable bit, Uzumaki Naruto improved. It was impossible not to, under their tutelage. Shisui proved to be an excellent slave driver, in the words of the Uzumaki, and Itachi had earned the title of Captain Killjoy, by showing the difference between his and Naruto's physical abilities every now and then. But Itachi could see it, for after 3 years of being with the Uzumaki, that he was happy. And in some strange way, he'd been happy too. It was like a breath of fresh air, being cooped up in ANBU, doing missions that required extraordinary skill, lying, stealing, and manipulating, and after that, simply talking to Naruto. And now, his protege was about to take the genin tests. Much as he and Shisui would have liked to see him at it, it was prohibited. He was also interested to see how Sasuke fared. It wasn't neglect, he would tell himself, what he was doing to Sasuke. He had, after all, taught him the very nuances of dojutsu usage, and Sasuke was, after all, an Uchiha. Combat, and the thirst to improve came like breathing to them. In fact, what he was most interested to see was how Naruto would fare against Sasuke later on. After all, Sasuke was taught combat itself, while Naruto had concentrated on his physicality. Hey! He looked up with a start. He'd been so engrossed in his thoughts that he never noticed Shisui had sneaked up behind him. Very remiss, of course, of Uchiha Itachi. He looked up at Uchiha Shisui. If Itachi had been considered as a child prodigy, Shursui was probably a child legend or something. There was nothing to say about Uchiha Shursui's combat, mostly because only a few people had seen him in action. A monstrosity is what he is, Itachi would say, after seeing him execute his move. For it was as if Uchiha Shursui was born for the very act of engaging in combat. And then, of course, Shursui would laugh, sober up, and say, "Don't be stupid, Itachi, you know combat's my weak area now, Genjutsu, that's my forte." And this would be the point where you would sit down, take a few deep breaths and try to fathom the certain Uchiha skills. Lies and secrets, the world is far darker than you think, Shursui-san. Do you know, Shursui-san? Do you want to know, Shursui-san? I can show you. I have no intention of deceiving anyone. His hair shook slightly with the wind, and his lean, lithe body was propped precariously against the bark of a tree. He'd asked Itachi to follow him, telling him not to talk in between. When they'd reached the preferred destination, he'd walked across to rest against the bark, and looked straight at Itachi. We need to talk. We need to talk about Uzumaki-san. Why? There's something wrong. Something, just the minutest of pieces is missing, Itachi. Do you think you're seeing the full picture? Do you think you're seeing the full picture? He observed Uchiha Shursui carefully. Lying down next to Shursui on the soft grass, his elegant fingers caressed a mop of brown hair. One small bang seemed to object to the general slicked-back hairstyle, lolling out in front aimlessly, subject to the notions of the wind. A flawless hand blocked the sun from Aizen Sousuke's face as he observed his fingernails. A slow smile tugged at the corners of his lips. Impressive. That. Uchiha Sasuke's embarrassment turned into anger. The rest of the world had been tuned out, and had been replaced by an image of Uzumaki Naruto being roasted over a charcoal fire. How dare he call the great prodigy playboy, the winner and destroyer of hearts, the excellent dresser, gay? Sasuke stopped that train of thought before Naruto's currently absurd suggestion turned horribly real. As Yumino Iruka walked in, the general decibel level in the class fell to 0. All eyes were on the ponytailed sensei as he smiled. The Joker's maniacal laughter ringing in the background, followed by "Why so serious, son? Welcome to your genin tests." There it was, confirmation of their worst fears. The papers in Yumino Iruka's hands were not nude sketches of Anko-sensei, as many in the group were desperately hoping for. This was the bomb that had been waiting to explode since they joined the academy. Unlike his retarded and more than slightly perverted classmates, Uchiha Sasuke was calmed by Yumino Iruka's entrance. This was home turf. No one had even come close to the Uchiha Tensei in any of the tests, be they oral, practical, or written. No one except Sakura, of course. She had even beaten the genius by 1 mark in a kunai 2-dimensional motion test, just because he had refused to give enough of a fuck to attempt the last question: what are the exact dimensions of a kunai? Even though a kunai and a high-precision measuring scale lay on his table. However, even that was not something to worry about anymore. Since they'd started dating, Sakura had begun giving wrong answers on purpose, just to satisfy Sasuke's petty ego, to let him cling on to first place. Sasuke had noticed this at once, as Sakura had answered what metal is a shuriken made of. With potato salad be it as it may, he did have an ego problem, and he was okay with letting Sakura try to ingratiate herself to him. This would make sure that the impending breakup wouldn't be unnatural. The Uchiha prodigy shook his head, and cleared off the last remnants of that bloody idiot's comment. Taking a deep breath, he ran a hand through his perfectly shampooed, groomed hair. We apologize for interrupting your fanfiction broadcast with this commercial. L'Oreal Konoha. Because Sasuke is worth it. Epic hair flip. I'll show him how an Uchiha returns an insult. Uzumaki Naruto, you better watch out. And last, no actual experiments of kunai throwing are allowed. You are supposed to calculate it by yourself. Yumino Iruka's voice, followed by nervous laughter, finally reached Sasuke's cochlea, as his rage abated. He looked down at his desk, and saw the test paper. Your time starts now. The next hour and a half was silent except the rustling of leaves outside the academy. The author apologizes for the cliché, gentle whoops, indicating comprehension of a question and moans, suggesting otherwise, all accompanied by Yumino Iruka's rhythmic snoring. Inuzuka Kiba stared at the question nervously. It stared back at him. He tried using telekinesis to somehow get it off the paper. A gust of wind pushed the paper off his desk. Cursing, he bent to pick up his sheet. And that was when he realized it. The singular, Wonderful thought that implied everything was going to be alright, and that the world was full of puppies, love, and nude sketches of Anko-sensei. Haruno Sakura was sitting next to him, hard at work, dutifully answering her questions like there was no tomorrow. This was it. Victory! And thus exclaiming in his mind, Kiba started copying. The desks were fairly close to each other, and she was answering question number 8, the same question as him. Her handwriting was neat, one that you could catch a mile away, and for Kiba, it was all too easy. Chuckling, he copied. A kunai is a tool derived from the trowel. It is a very basic construction, which, in the hands of ninja, can be used as a multifunctional weapon. There are 2 broad categorizations of kunai. The sho kunai, the shorter variation, used commonly for throwing or at the end of staffs. The dai kunai, the longer variation, used in direct combat. Kiba grinned, finishing his answer. Sakura had already moved on to the next question. Her answer to this question had been perfect. He could already see Irika-sensei with stars in his eyes giving him full marks, and even a smiley face for his perfect answer. Meanwhile, Sakura had noticed the Inuzuka's furtive attempts at copying her, and had turned the other way. Kiba didn't care though. This answer was enough. He would sail to victory with this. With a gulp, he stared at the question he'd answered just now. The Shodai Hokage introduced the concept of 3-man cells. State true or false. Kiba tried to use telekinesis to wipe himself off the face of the earth. Meanwhile, Uchiha Sasuke was having the torturous equivalent of a supernova explode in his head. No, scratch that. He was having the torturous equivalent of talking to Sakura. Why the fuck isn't he writing anything? He stared at the blonde Jinchuriki with a frustration that seemed to be taking him over. He had expected at least some competition from the newcomer, not this. For Naruto had just slept for the past hour and a half. Soundly so, in fact. First he calls me gay, which I suppose was a challenge. Then, he goes and does this. What is he trying to achieve? A very gentle snore emanated from his mouth, carrying over 4 benches back through the silence. Sasuke could not bear it anymore. He had to know. He simply had to know what Naruto's true intentions were. Another snore. Fuck him. He was going to find out. Definitely. His test paper just lay there, abandoned. Ino looked carefully at her answers. The designated 2 hours were almost over. She'd done well, actually. She'd studied quite a bit for this test, and she even had a chance of beating old forehead girl, if she'd gotten most of the doubtful ones right. Surveying her sheet one last time, she drew the final line, wiped the dust off her sheet, and leaned back, satisfied with her effort. Uzumaki Naruto immediately caught her attention. Apart from the fact that he was sitting next to her, what did it was that he was sleeping. Sleeping in the Genin graduation exam, for land's sake. Frowning, she looked around. Everyone was still writing. Making sure no one was looking, she straightened, and poked the blonde-haired boy on the side. With a grunt, Naruto raised his head, popping one eye open. Frowning at him, she mouthed, "Done?" In what was one of the most in-depth and detailed replies ever, he nodded, before going back to sleep. Sighing, Yamanaka Ino started looking around at the others. Sakura was holding her answer sheet up, and wordlessly reading off of it. Kiba was next to her, doing something weird. He seemed to flap his hands around the paper, and making miming motions at it, before giving up, and collapsing with a grunt. Chuji, on the other side, had somehow sneaked in a packet of crisps, and munching away steadily, spilling crumbs all over his answer sheet. Shino was sitting straight, hands folded, looking straight ahead. Ino was sure the Aburame would perpetually remain that even if a nude Anko-sensei walked in singing Skrillex's latest electro-punk dance number. To her back, Hinata seemed to have finished too, and was staring into space, with a slightly off-center expression on her face. On the far left, a girl was whispering desperately to Shikamaru Nara, who was fast asleep. And then, there he sat, the genius Uchiha. Wait, what? Ino forcefully stifled a guffaw. For Sasuke looked like his last bowel movement had coincided with the first Shinobi War. That wasn't all. He also seemed to be staring straight at Naruto. Was there some truth to Naruto's statement then? Was Sasuke gay? You used to go out with him? The Uzumaki's voice shook her out of her reverie. I thought you were sleeping. Yeah. Why? No, nothing. You were just staring at him. He's going out with what was her name again, Sakura, right? Yeah. Ino's reply came out stiffer than she thought it would, leading to Naruto's face cracking into a grin. Ino stared at him irritably. You're annoying. And you're. But before Ino could hear exactly what she was, several things happened in quick succession. First, Irika-sensei jumped with sudden gusto as a bell rang, groans seemed to echo through the classroom, Kiba seemed to let out a high-pitched scream, while Shikamaru continued snoring. And before the frantic students could complete their last answers, Irika-sensei had already used a jutsu to collect all the papers. She drew her hands back as her answer sheet whizzed toward the Chunin. A collective sigh went around the class. Uchiha Sasuke was fuming. He finally realized what had transpired, as his blank answer sheet flew towards Irika. His lips curled into a fierce snarl. Definitely not a magazine cover look, but I have to consider the circumstances. I see what you did there, Uzumaki. Naruto. Now Irika's voice cut through his mental rant. Who wants to discuss the answers, HM? The class seemed to resonate with the sound of more than 30 students trying to force themselves through a single door to escape heartless torture. Ino smiled at their teacher as she walked out calmly with Naruto. The cool breeze blowing in the academy courtyard seemed very welcoming after all that test tension. Suddenly she started. Uchiha Itachi was there, waiting for someone. He looked as foreboding as ever. Perhaps he'd heard about Ino's heartfelt desire to acquaint her knee with Sasuke's crotch repeatedly? Worse still, was he here to neutralize her before she did it? Oh no, oh no, oh no. Worriedly, she latched on to what she thought was her ex-boyfriend's arm. Hey, isn't it a little early for that? Hearing the Jinchuriki's surprised and slightly smug voice, Ino drew away hastily, blood rushing to her face. It's not like that, okay? I just happened to trip, that's all, keep the clichés coming, baby. Naruto smiled, implying Ino's previous statement was just as made up as a transsexual potato. Which, the author might add, isn't made up at all. For facts, look up 10 things that constitute your wet dream. Fine, if that helps you sleep at night. Naruto. The couple turned around to face a steaming Uchiha Sasuke. He looked ready to deliver a psychotic rant. Not to be mistaken for 50-cent rapping. Then, a completely anticlimactic silence followed, as he gasped for air. How dare you do this to me? Ino yawned as another humongous breath followed. This was getting tedious. I was watching you all the time. You wrote nothing. Freaking nothing. I kept thinking why? Why would he do this? Then, at the end of the paper, it freaking hit me. You did that on purpose. You made me ignore my fucking paper. Now I didn't write a single fucking answer. I'm going to have to waste 2 more fucking writing the second test tomorrow. There. 2 hours of my life, wasted. At least if the test wasn't so fucking retarded, I would have written it, but this? The Genin test? Damn you. Another breath. With a start, Uchiha Sasuke noticed the Jinchuriki's bored expression, and realized that his rant/rap had just been inside his own head, at the mental image of Naruto being roasted. See above. He took another deep breath, and finally managed to get out a single sentence through clenched teeth. Are you happy? That you checked me out for 2 hours straight during a test? Naruto's smile was wider now. Certainly, my friend. You can tell me all about it. The earlier you come out of the closet, the better. Let's go, Ino. And with that last broadside, the two of them turned, leaving the wrecked remains of Uchiha Sasuke on the courtyard floor, gasping for air, face contorted in anger and confusion, as he tried to figure out how the blonde had destroyed him on so many levels. A killer and a warrior. Wherein lay the difference, really, if any? A tough question, but he knew the answer. A killer felt shame for his actions. He felt remorse, he felt regret, he felt hurt. He would cry, shed tears for his enemy. He would curse himself to damnation. Of course, the best killers would save these moments of emotion for later, for after their enemies have been eliminated, the deed done. A warrior, on the other hand, did the same thing a killer did. However, a warrior exulted in his enemy's defeat. He would rejoice at his enemy's loss, and celebrate, along with the others. He would be heaped honors, laurels. He would be applauded for his extraordinary courage and skill. And all the while, the killer would weep, both for himself and the enemy. And then, he would get up, steady himself, stop gasping. He would ready his weapon, he would stand, he would walk, determination galvanizing his demeanor. The next target, after all, had to be eliminated. Meanwhile, the warrior would sleep, oblivious to anything, intoxicated with alcohol, a vain smile adorning his features, the ghost of a triumphant laugh etched on his foolish face. And in one instant, the killer's blade would pass clean through the warrior's throat. Uchiha Itachi walked out of the Hokage building. He'd just received news about his latest mission. One that, well, was something he'd never done before. The Hokage had deemed it necessary due to certain circumstances that Uchiha Itachi was to become a Jonin sensei now. However, that wasn't the reason for him walking toward the academy now. Itachi made his way through the door, and stopped outside to survey the scene. The test seemed to have finished, and the students were making their way out. His sharp eyes immediately caught the silver glint that Naruto's chain had among the crowd, and walked forward. His brother, Sasuke, seemed to have something to say to Naruto, much to his surprise. Had they become friends already then? Funny, he never thought Sasuke would be the type to befriend the lonely Jinchuriki. However, he didn't have time. Just as Naruto and another girl next to him walked past Sasuke, Uchiha Itachi's presence made itself known. Uzumaki Naruto. Every single head in the courtyard turned in awe at the sound of his voice. Gasps and giggles broke the silence. Yeah? What is it? Why are you here, Itachi? The silence magnified. The surprise entrant, Uzumaki Naruto, knew Uchiha Itachi, the Uchiha Itachi on first-name basis. We need to talk. It's about Shisui. The students were now ogling openly at the two of them. Were they talking about the Uchiha Shisui? The one with the insane levels of genjutsu prowess? So Naruto knew him too? Okay. Let's go then. See you later, Ino-chan. Leaving behind a stunned Ino, a furious Sasuke and a shocked group of students, Uchiha Itachi and Uzumaki Naruto walked out calmly. He smiled as the wind blew around his face, ruffling the glass he was sleeping on. His hands were resting carelessly by his sides, as the ends of his haori fluttered aimlessly. Konohagakure was a pleasant place indeed. No one took notice of the tall man lying down with nary a care in the world. Or more precisely, no one could. 3 years had passed, 3 eventful years, and yet the time to come would be far more exciting than ever before. Flashback. Hey, look who it is. One of the boys sniggered, pointing at a small boy at the corner, playing on his own. Oh, look who it, indeed. It's little Sousuke. The 3 tall boys, each 15 years of age, walked up to the smaller, unsuspecting boy, kneeling down, hard at work at something. The boys looked over, seeing that the small boy had made a sandcastle, and a good one at that. One of the boys put his finger to his lips, telling the others to keep quiet. Walking up ahead of the small boy nonchalantly, he turned, and with sudden ferocity, kicked the boy's work, the sandcastle, hard. Made, after all, only out of sand, the structure collapsed, sending a spray of earth into the small boy's eyes. As the boy named Sousuke cried out in shock and pain, the bigger boys dissolved into howls and shouts of laughter. The one who had kicked the sandcastle was on the ground, rolling around at Sousuke's reaction, uncaring for the 10-year-old boy's pain of having a clod of earth thrown into his eyes. Did the boy stand up and scream then? No. Did he call for his parents? How could he do that? He was an orphan after all. After rubbing his eyes, Sousuke stood up, pushing the sand off his brown hair. The boys stopped laughing and stared at him. He looked at them for a second. He turned. Walking a few steps, he sat down, and started piling up sand, in effort to build a second one. He turned when he heard the big boy's surprisingly quiet voice. Think you're too clever, Sousuke? Think you're smart, building a sand castle when we kicked your first one down, huh? The little boy looked at them blankly. What are you looking at us for, you little shit? Open your mouth. Answer yes. Sousuke turned again, and started shaping the sand. With a cry, the biggest of the boys leapt forward, angry that Sousuke hadn't answered them like he should have. But this time, Sousuke was ready. He turned, he only had a second to react, and he did so. Curling his little fist into a ball, with terrifying accuracy, he met the boy's groin. With a shriek of pain, the boy who had attacked Sousuke shrank to the ground. Unable to speak, he retched. The other boys, watching initially with smiles on their faces, became quiet. They didn't say a word. Ignoring their fallen leader, one of the boys moved forward. Sousuke, his courage now gone, shrank back, trying to get away, fear evident in the poor boy's eyes. One of the boys caught Sousuke before he could get away. The other caught his hands. The third one looked straight into Sousuke's eyes. You're finished, kid? The boy named Sousuke screamed. It was loud, and anyone could have heard it even at a distance. And they did. They all did. The people knew that Aizen Sousuke was screaming. And yet, they remained unmoved. Sousuke lay on the ground, now no longer screaming. Tears streaked his face. His hair was messy, his arms and legs bruised. He suspected his left wrist had broken. Pain ruled his body. The little boy couldn't identify which part hurt more. He crawled forward. And all the while, Aizen Sousuke never said a word. He crawled forward, gritting his teeth, ignoring the stabbing sensation. Within a minute, Sousuke passed out, exhausted, hurting and hungry. He opened his eyes slowly. The first thing that came to his mind was that his wrist felt stiff. He looked down. His vision finally focused to reveal that his wrist had been bandaged. He looked up. 2 children were looking at him eagerly. A boy and a girl, both his age by the looks of it. The girl spoke first. She was dressed in nice-looking white robes, and her hair curled just under her neck. Her startlingly yellow eyes seemed to sparkle with delight. "Ooh. You're awake at last." Sousuke moved back in fear and shrank into a ball, afraid that the girl might lash out at him. "Be quiet, Ichi-chan." The boy reprimanded her, "You're scaring him." The girl, now kneeling down in front of him, moved towards Sousuke. "Don't be scared. We won't hurt you." The boy behind her nodded at him firmly. He had sandy blonde hair, and eyes that seemed to smile all by themselves. A shock of hair seemed to intrude between his eyebrows, giving him a cute babyish look. "What's your name?" "SS Sousuke." The girl seemed to giggle. Her purple hair shook as she did so. "That's funny. Are you two related?" she asked of her friend. "Don't be dumb, Ichi-chan." "I'm not dumb. Don't be mean." Sousuke looked at the two of them. When they saw him staring, they stopped bickering. "Ooh," the girl exclaimed, "this boy here's Kisuke. He's my friend. See, Sousuke, Kisuke, I thought you might be related." And she stopped to take a breath. "I'm Yorichi," she completed, with an air of importance, pointing at herself. An awkward silence seemed to follow. Finally Sousuke broke it. "Thanks," he said with a smile. For the first time, Sousuke Aizen smiled. And it felt good. Whoa. Yamanaka Ino watched Uzumaki Naruto leave with the Uchiha Itachi. She'd never seen anyone so close to Itachi except Sasuke. She caught the glint of his silver chain bobbing up and down, as he jogged to keep up with the super-fast Uchiha prodigy. What is going on? She wondered. Is Naruto so important that even Itachi asks him about certain matters? Or maybe Naruto just overheard something, and Itachi was ensuring that the Jinchuriki keep his mouth shut? Whatever it was, Ino knew one thing for certain. Her new blonde boyfriend-to-be definitely had a deeper and more profound personality than what he chose to display to the world. Well, I like that he's secretive. Better by far than that goofy show-off, Sasuke. Speaking of Sasuke, he was having the worst day of his life. First, his Aizen declines to come to the academy to drop him off. Next, that Uzumaki Naruto comes and challenges his manhood. Later, he gets his manhood sawn off by Naruto, as he realizes the Jinchuriki's true motive. Next, to further drive salt up the wound's ass, his Aizen arrives at the academy, only to leave with fucking Uzumaki Naruto. Sasuke sat in silent contemplation, and plotted revenge against him, now declared his worst enemy. Worst fucking enemy. The setting sun had just touched the top of Kangakure's outer walls. Hiruzen Sarutobi gazed intently at it, admiring the wealth of scarlet, vermilion and crimson spreading in the sky. It seemed like a painter's paradise, as the warm red tones slowly faded into a neutral purple, and then, as the last arc of the sun dipped below the horizon, the colors finally descending into a cool, serene blue. The Sandaime sighed, not realizing that he'd been holding his breath for over a minute. A shiver ran down his spine as he imagined the future. So many possibilities, so many lives, so many endings. He'd lived long enough to notice when change came over the horizon. It glid majestically in the blue twilight, leaving behind the past. Landing, it spontaneously rose into flames, burning down the present and creating momentary chaos. After all traces of the present were wiped out, and unrecognizable, it rose from its own ashes, to become the future. Hiruzen Sarutobi saw countless phoenixes soar towards his beloved village, and he knew one of them was going to land, right here, bringing the flames of chaos, and the rebirth of Konohagakure was imminent. Which one will it be, I wonder? He gazed at the setting sun. He always loved it. After all those years, after all that battle, after all that bloodshed, after mindless fighting, he stood there, not knowing whether what he'd done was right or wrong. He hadn't changed much physically, through all those years. The same sandy blonde hair flopped down carelessly. Now, of course, he'd gone in for a slightly bold green and white striped hat to go with his kimono. The hat always seemed to create a sort of shadow on his cheeks, giving him a dark, rather sinister look. His beard was perpetually in a state of semi-existence, something that Yoruichi seemed to adore. The sun had finally sunk. 3 years had passed since Sousuke had been sealed away for good, imprisoned to serve out 20,000 years. The general purpose, of course, was suffering. The Shinigami wanted Aizen Sousuke to suffer, to repent every last action, to wallow in regret and self-pity, and hopefully drive himself mad in that time span. Or was that what was really happening? I hate you. I despise you. Sousuke. Time to go. Her voice shook him out of his reverie. That moment of doubt, as to whether Aizen Sousuke, once that harmless little boy who would be beaten for no reason at all, had escaped punishment in what would undoubtedly be his most spectacular illusion yet, that moment of doubt vanished. And since we won't be doing this for quite some time to come. Shihoin Yoruichi gave him a small kiss before turning. Time to go, eh? And as the two of them stepped forward, Urahara Kisuke's doubt gave way. It gave way to belief. Aizen Sousuke had indeed escaped punishment. This was the absolute truth. And only 2 people knew about this, himself, and the girl who completed the trio that had been formed when the 3 of them had met as kids, Shihoin Yoruichi. Aizen Sousuke had escaped. And Urahara knew where to. The evening lights had come on. The usual chatter had started, with a gaggle of girls materializing out of thin air in front of every shop, much to their date's dismay. He smiled. He stroked the cat's back, stopping to tickle it behind its ear. He turned the page. Purring, the cat rested its head on his lap and closed its eyes. He turned yet another page, giggling quite unnaturally. Strange things were about to happen. 1 year had passed since he'd received the cryptic message, leaving him wondering as to whether he'd drunk too much sake on Kurenai's birthday. But then, it had turned out, strange things did happen after all. After all, there had been that one time when Ibiki had sung bringing sexy back after Anko had slipped him a few. Well, this wasn't the time for that. Strange things were indeed about to happen. Ah, here at last. So this is Konohagakure? Screw me, we should have been here way long ago. This is awesome. Hatake Kakashi stared at the blonde-haired man and a rather strikingly dark, good-looking woman next to him. No one took notice of the 2 people staring at the famous copy ninja Kakashi. Or more precisely, no one could. Kisuke smiled at Kakashi. Gomen any? But here we are. Hyuga Hinata stepped silently through the underbrush. Suddenly, she flinched as her foot cracked a dried twig. They surely heard that. The dark-haired heiress waited silently, awaiting discovery. No one found her. Apparently, Naruto-kun and Itachi-san were preoccupied. Hinata took another step forward, this time activating her Byakugan, and carefully selecting the perfect, most silent path. Mission Impossible theme starts playing in the background as Hinata whips out her laser beam photographic Devi. Oh wait. Wrong fanfic. Since the start of the Genin tests, Hinata had fretted and fumbled a little more than her usual self. As soon as the blonde had entered, her heart had skipped an entire bar. Sheet music joke, for the musically ignorant section in the audience. With a tinge of red on her face, she noticed that the seat right next to her was empty. Oh, how she'd wish Naruto had sat right next to her. Hey, mind if I sit here? This was it. Her chance to say yes, and then reenact all those hot lemon fanfiction incidents that seemed to happen over the internets. What the heck is a lemon fanfiction anyway, and what's an internet? Hinata often wondered. Why yes, and in Naruto Keikei-kun, she had managed to blurt out, stuttering even her punctuation, before noticing he wasn't even there. She looked forward, surprised, and got the shock of her life. Naruto was sitting next to Ino. It was Ino whom he'd asked, not her. A pang of jealousy had swept through her then, but she'd managed to push it back and pass the paper, somehow. And then, Naruto had exited the classroom with Ino as well. That was a little disheartening, but Hinata had stayed firm. And then, as he'd followed the Uchiha genius outside, a firm resolve made its presence known. In a split second, her decision was made. She'd follow him, wherever he was going. She'd tell him how she felt. She descended from her fantasies to notice that the love of her life was already gone. She hurried to follow, embarrassed by her own distraction. She had to see where he was going. It was very uncharacteristic for the Uchiha genius to socialize with anyone except the Uchiha and the third Hokage. She closed her eyes momentarily. For a second, the vision of the Byakugan dissolved into blackness. She opened them again, only to let out an audible gasp. It didn't matter really, the fact that the gasp was audible. They were gone. His sandy blonde hair seemed to twitch momentarily against the pleasant breeze. The cat's bright yellow eyes glinted in the afternoon sun. His gray hair seemed to twitch momentarily against the annoying breeze. Hatake Kakashi drew a hand from his pocket to scratch the cat on his shoulder. He walked by, nonchalantly observing things from his peripheral vision, even as he tried not to giggle at the lewd illustration accompanying the smut. "Ooh, look who's walking in. Where've you been, you shit?" Kakashi looked over at Anko. "Oh, lounging about as usual." "My, quite the exciting life you lead. Anyway, they're already there, you better get your ass in quick, the old coot ain't in the greatest of moods." "See you?" Kakashi walked along, folding his book and slipping it safely into his pocket. "Interesting," a voice seemed to say. "I always liked feisty women." The second voice in Kakashi's head chimed in, the playful voice of the Shihuin princess. "Pfft. We'll see who's feisty. Most of the time it's all talk and no ink." Kakashi rubbed his temple, muttering for the voices to stop, even as a few people in the office stopped to stare at the talented nutcase now talking to himself. Crazy one, that. Night was upon the day faster than one would have expected. And even as it approached, night found Uzumaki Naruto in a place he hadn't visited in a long while. The sound of the leaves whispering to the wind was a pleasant one, even as he spied the moon through the gap in the canopy. Shafts of dull silver moonlight made their way through the green cover, giving the place the ethereal feel that Naruto was so familiar with and loved. The air was cool, clean and fresh, such a change from the usual flavored air in the village, one that was full of life, enthusiasm, hope and cheer. He brought his right hand in front of his face. A droplet of blood broke off from the side of his palm and dropped onto his white hoodie. The rest of the blood had already dried, making it look as if his hand was colored red in itself. And even as he brought the hand towards his lips, even as his tongue darted out lightly to lick the blood-soaked hand, he thought he heard the man's whisper. "You're wondering, aren't you, whether you have done the right thing or not? Don't, child. Remember your path. Remember what you've learned, remember what you know. Remember your suffering, Uzumaki Naruto." A raw, vulgar smile seemed to play on the boy's lips, even as he reveled in the metallic aftertaste. He could hear the whispers, he could feel the soft texture of the man's haori as he kneeled to ruffle his hair, and he could feel the long, elegant fingers touching his face, moving it one way and another, much like a father checking if his son had any bruises after the day's play. His first kill. Oh, how it excited him! How it pleased him, to see that look of utter helplessness on his victim's face, to hear the mangled scream that made its way out of the half-dead man's throat. He couldn't help it turned him on in wild, perverse ways. His kill had pleaded, his hands clawing at this air, trying in vain to overpower him. And all throughout he'd laughed, a coarse, throaty laughter that had felt slightly out of place for a boy that young. And suddenly, the whispers stopped. He was alone that night. Uzumaki Naruto stood up, looking at his blood-soaked hand. The smile was replaced by the same emotionless visage that predated his nature. This was only his first. If he wanted to give them a reason to hate, he needed lots more. The usual chatter was present in the halls of the academy. "Sasuke-kun, how was the test?" Several heads turned, as Hirono Sakura bounded towards the star student, who walked in through the entrance looking like he had shit under his nose. "HN." She latched onto him as usual, drawing venomous glances from multiple girls. Ino looked like she had just seen a horse give birth. Though, her glare was lasered at the boy instead of the bimbo for a change. He deserves nothing better than that wide-forehead flat bitch, with gay pink hair. Gay. That reminded the blonde girl about the incident that had taken place the previous day. Uzumaki Naruto, of all people, had decided to show his retarded, handsome, face in the academy, after who knows how many freaking years, and had made a lame, totally apt comment that Sasuke had climbed over the fence to hairier pastures. She was grateful, though. That little stunt Naruto had pulled was the push she had needed to get over that jerk. Sure, he was an Uchiha, that fucking presumptuous, judging, haughty clan with their holier-than-thou attitude, and the Sharingan. Maybe they deserved to be taken down a peg. She sauntered down the large corridor, a little away from the downright ugly Sasuke lovers group, a small gathering of girls staring, drooling and generally providing the dreamy audience Sasuke's overinflated ego usually craved. She looked at them too with the same distasteful stare, conveniently forgetting that she used to lead that small group just a few days ago. As the general crowd of Gen Improbables turned left into the classroom, Ino felt a hand tap her left shoulder. Turning left, she saw no one. Just the gaggle of people walking through the door. She turned back, to find Uzumaki Naruto to her right, looking very much the badass from last week. The tousled hair looked rather spiky today. His face seemed almost too good to be true. Even the usually deal-breaking whiskers seemed manly on him. Just the nearness of him, smelling the fresh, clean scent of him, and his breath. And as usual, our commercial break. Paloha. The shinobi mint with the hole. For the minty freshness every ninja desires. She just wanted to reach out and cup his face in her hands, lean in closer, and kiss him. With a start, she realized she was as red as the roses she sold on her counter. Quickly shifting her gaze down, she noticed his ring. The silver circlet seemed to give off a cool, yet somehow unfamiliar radiance. It felt like touching it was somehow forbidden, but tempting. He wasn't wearing his necklace from the other day. All silver jewelry looked so insanely cool on him. Ino shook her head, dismissing the recent wave of affection. Taking a step forward, she resolved to take more care of her emotions. That resolution was broken a second later, as she banged her head on the closed door. Bouncing back, she fell flat on her behind, shouting out every swear word in the book. Her rant was interrupted by Iruka-sensei opening the door, a shocked expression on his face. Obviously, he did not expect a 13-year-old to know such language, let alone use it at an inanimate object. She switched to abashment next. A recommendation to go shove wood somewhere was unpleasant and reprehensible in general. Doing so within earshot of a teacher was almost scandalous. I'm so dead. There goes my reputation. Shove it up where the sun don't shine, UF dash. I'm sorry? Yumino Iruka opened the door, a look on his face somewhere halfway between shock and disbelief. Yamanaka? You have something to say? Uzumaki Naruto stood by in the background nonchalantly, suppressing his smile quite easily. He'd barely opened his mouth to say hi, when Ino had drawn quite close and observed his latest accessory. Distracted, her forehead, oh the irony, had come into high-velocity impact with the door, resulting in the Yamanaka employing her choicest expletives at no one in general, even as Yumino Iruka seemed mollified. Oh, and Uzumaki-kun is here too. Please come in, Naruto, we'll be started in a few minutes. Oh, and Yamanaka even as he walked in, he sensed Ino ducking her head in intense embarrassment. To his surprise, for the latter part of his sentence, Iruka-sensei's voice seemed to have undergone a change, decidedly for the worse, for Yamanaka Ino. If I hear those words being used in my corridors one more time, he threatened in the deep baritone of doom, leaving the sentence unfinished for extra effect. Ino covered her mouth, shaking her head frantically. The sensei nodded sternly, before leaning on the door, waiting for a few others to file in. Well, great start to the big day, eh? You shut your freaking mouth, Uzumaki Naruto. Not a single word, or I might burst. I'm having enough on my mind with Sakura and her. Naruto walked along the aisle, and chose a bench to sit in at random, moving slightly to the center in order to give the blonde-haired girl space. And even as they sat, whispers seemed to fly, glances seemed to dance here and there. Has the Uzumaki already scored then? Damn, he's in for a rough one if the Yamanaka girl and he are dating. A group of students were whispering in the background. It was barely heard, really inaudible unless A, you were one of the boys partaking in said gossip, or B, you were Uzumaki Naruto. Naruto, however, chose to ignore it, as he casually brought his palms in front of his face, the smallest of smiles on his lips. A droplet of sweat broke off from his palm and dropped down. Both Naruto and Ino turned. See, can I sit here, Uzumaki-keikun? He blinked. That's faster than I expected. Oh, sure. No, don't ask such things, Hinata-chan. The whispers only seemed to intensify. So if he's fine with Hyuga-san sitting next to him like that, maybe they aren't dating after all. He turned, returning to his neutral position. Uzumaki Naruto didn't need his peripheral vision to tell that his blonde-haired friend wasn't particularly pleased with the arrangement. On the other hand, he wasn't too concerned. Priorities exist, Ino-chan, I'm sorry. Classroom 9 at the first floor of the academy hadn't seen such silence since around the same time last year. The students were breaking something that was considered, under normal circumstances, the first tenet of studenthood: give your teacher your unconditional attention when he talks. Right. Now that we have all your results, I must say, even though all of you have somehow passed, there were a few that needed a little helping on the way. Quite the surprise, actually. He paused to shoot an ill-disguised glare at Uchiha Sasuke, even as Ino stifled her snigger. It is, then, my pleasure to announce that your schooling days are officially over. Each of you, when you wear your headbands, should be aware of the fact that you are now stepping into another world, one that is quite similar to your quest to fill your answer sheets, that drew several skeptical stares, in the sense that, well, you can do your best to come up with answer to a problem in life, but there is always a variable and element of surprise that could work for or against you. Be it the leniency and understanding of your evaluator or your comrades' canaille that will deflect the killing blow meant for you at the very last moment. It does sound frightening, but in the end, life out there is. Finally, as important as it is to have fear in life, as important as it is to tread cautiously out there in the world, I want to remind you that it is your first duty to enjoy your work. Love what you do, and you won't need to fear even if your answer to the Shodai's system of three-man cells happens to be the classification of kunai as weapons. And with that, I'd like to commence the announcement of teams for the current batch of Genin. Team 6 will comprise of Kita Masaomi, Sanahara Enri, and Ryugami Mikado. Naruto leaned back, observing calmly. Next to him, Yamanaka Ino was glancing around excitedly, while he could feel a gaze on him from the girl sitting on the other side. He actually felt it physically, as this tsunami of affection, adoration, and just plain rainbow shit love. The Hyuga heiress was nothing if not infatuated. Ah, Hinata-chan, you continually amaze me with your befuddled mind. Another flame-edged glare of anger was beaming in from the other side of the packed classroom. No prizes for guessing who. The humiliated Uchiha Sasuke had been the center of gossip since his entry into the academy. Known as the unbeatable fighter, full-on playboy, killer of hearts, he had had a string of loyal fans follow him wherever he chose to go. One examination with that had changed everything. His sudden new interest had made his male fans desert the audience he usually had, and dropped his female attendance quite a bit as well. Only the most hardcore of Sasuke fans still followed him, but even they had started whispering of a possible pairing between the two class toppers. He channeled all his hatred towards the blonde, and noticed his number one enemy turn his head, ever so slowly, to face him. As their eyes met, there were physical sparks flashing between the two. A very tangible feeling, one that everyone in the class noticed. A murmur rose up as both the Sasuke hater camp and the Sasuke is awesome and totally not gay maybe camp both whispered anxiously. Yumino Irika cleared his throat. No one gave a fuck. He let out an audible sigh. This was turning out to be just like that failure of a date with Kurenai-san. Though, in retrospect, that was his fault. This scenario, however, wasn't. Attention, he said a little louder. No one gave a fuck. He was about to explode into a rant about how they all were worthless, and they were never going to pass the Chunin exam at this rate, when he noticed what was really going on. He saw the two boys staring into each other's eyes. Saw the whole class staring at the two boys, and then suddenly, sparks glowed in his vision. Strong sparks of hatred, humiliation, shattered pride, which the slightly retarded sensei misconstrued as love. He thought, this probably doesn't change anything, except the dynamic of the next team. Wow. Itachi with his younger brother's gay lover, and the gay lover's straight lover? Genius he might be, let's see him handle this. The next team, before he had the chance to say anything more, he got the undivided attention of the class. All except Sasuke and Naruto. He paused for dramatic effect. Uchiha Sasuke. The two lovebirds were looking at him as well. Uzumaki Naruto. He had anticipated commotion. But this went to a scale beyond the murmuring he expected. There was actual talking as everybody ignored the Chunin yet again, and looked at Sasuke and Naruto again. The black-haired boy was back to his slightly angry, yet excited stare. Naruto swiveled his head slowly. Gave Sasuke his best, most happy smile. Then winked, and blew a kiss straight at him. Huh! The entire class went haywire at that public display of affection. Why people shortened this to PDA, I'll never know. Irika gave up trying to control the chaos. He simply sat in his chair, muttering to himself about the weird life choices kids made these days. Haruno Sakura was aghast. She was Sasuke-kun's girlfriend. Naruto had no freaking right to do what he'd just done. She started to move towards him, ready to cut his shriveled balls and throw them out of the window he was sitting next to, when she noticed the very sad, nearly depressed girl next to him. Hinata looked ready to cry her heart out. Maybe I'll save his rape for later, let this pathetic stereotypical girl have her moment. Hinata wanted to cry, but managed not to with sheer effort of will. She raised her head from her hands and looked to the love of her life. Naruto was enjoying the scenery, totally uncaring of the complete disarray he had thrown the classroom into. He watched as a blue jay landed on the branch hanging closest to the window. He watched as it slowly dropped the tiny, squirming worms it had collected into the snapping mouths of its offspring. As the unfortunate creatures were greedily gobbled up, a very unnatural smile seemed to break out on his impassive countenance. It seemed to split his face into two, and even from an angle almost directly behind the blonde boy, Hinata could see the glint of his right canine. As the worm gave its last death throes, Naruto raised his hand to his exposed teeth. A small drop of water, or sweat, or something had condensed on his ring. Darting his tongue out, he touched it with the tip. As soon as his tongue left the ring's surface, the drop was gone, like it had been completely absorbed. He smiled for a second longer, then resumed his plain, slightly bored expression. He seems to be taking great pleasure in the situation the worms are in, thought the heiress of the Byakugan, but quickly dismissed the idea, reprimanding herself for even coming up with it. I won't think like that. Naruto-kun could never think like that. He's kind and cheerful, and I love him. He just loves birds, that's all. Hyuga Hinata. The class went silent again. Why had Iruka-sensei mentioned her? They turned to the Chunin, portraying the same question through their confused expressions. Team 7, Iruka sighed. He was going to discipline the next batch of would-be genins to within an inch of their lives. Team 7 will consist of Uchiha Sasuke, Uzumaki Naruto, and Hyuga Hinata. The whole school heard the next few minutes of heated discussion, insulting, face-palming, and general mayhem. The Hyuga seemed to have attained an intense orgasm, and was staring at Naruto with unicorns and rainbows and all that girly stuff in her eyes. Amplifying his voice with spirit chakra, Iruka silenced the room with a shouted, near-deafening silence. Continuing on, he announced the next two teams before anyone had the chance to speak another words. Team 8 will consist of Haruno Sakura, Inuzuka Kiba, and Aburame Shino. Iruka ignored the hideous look Sakura gave him for teaming her up with the guys with the creepiest abilities of all time, and for not putting her in with Sasuke. Sorry, Sakura, but I really didn't want couples in the same cell. Little did I know Naruto and Sasuke would be one. Hinata seems to be in a one-sided love, as far as I know, so I deemed it safe. Whatever. Genins should learn to cope with whatever shit is thrown at them. You don't have a choice, you freaking spoiled kids. Continuing, he announced the next few teams. Sakura frankly didn't care anymore. Now, she wasn't in her boyfriend's team, and to use a flamethrower on a fresh wound, his homosexual partner was. I don't care, Sasuke-kun. I'm never letting you go too far away from me. When Ino's name was mentioned, her ears pricked up, but it was some random team, with Shikamaru and Choji. She slid down in her table, wearily anticipating the Jonin sensei who was going to be their cell leader. Fuck this. Fuck the Jonin, whoever it is. Fuck Iruka sensei, and all of his crap. And fuck you, Uzumaki Naruto. I hate you! And suddenly, the whispers stopped. He was alone that night. Uzumaki Naruto stood up, looking at his blood-soaked hand. The smile was replaced by the same emotionless visage that predated his nature. The night had still been young. His palm clasped the man's mouth with an iron grip. The man struggled, he thrashed around, beating wildly on his captor's hand, red eyes darting pleadingly over to the boy's companion. Uchiha Itachi stood behind, kissed by shadows, as emotionless as the dark that was closing in on the poor victim that night. The boy's eyes seemed to be wide, observing his victim with nothing more than mild curiosity, and even as the victim's cries slowly came to a halt, his wild thrashing reduced to mere twitches, a small, coy smile danced on the boy's lips. The boy's lips never moved, and yet the voice came floating by, one with the wind in the dark clearing on that night. I can show you I have no intention of deceiving anyone. You see, for a crime to take place, for the criminal to face judgment before the eyes of God, there needs to be a victim, a sacrifice, in order to ensure that the criminal can be charged guilty. The laugh seemed to ring in Uchiha Shirsui's ears, as terror closed in on him. The grip tightened. And slowly, Uzumaki Naruto's right hand snaked up, towards his cheek, stroking it as a lover would. He pleaded to all his gods, he pleaded for something, anything to free him. Oh please, oh please, oh please. No help would arrive. The boy's hands crawled towards his eyes. For a moment, it was just the two of them, Uchiha Shursui, Uzumaki Naruto. He stared into the boy's hazel brown eyes, so lifeless. And then, the moment disappeared. The fingers crawled up, and in one fluid motion, clawed into his eyes. Orarg horharhal. Two fingers dug into his eyes, pain. Fuck fuck, God please please please. The man's screams reached a crescendo as the boy drew his fingers out, having got what he wanted. He smiled, an excellent symphony, and even as it reached the crescendo, as Uchiha Shursui reached a level of pain that could kill in sheer intensity, the boy's smile vanished. There was a time when Uchiha Shursui had taught all he could have to Naruto Uzumaki Naruto. There was a time when their relationship was that of an elder and a younger brother. Or was it all just an? The windpipe ruptured, and Uchiha Shursui's world converged in a pinnacle of pain and ecstasy. Relief at last. Death. Shursui is dead? Sarutobi Hiruzen was glaring daggers at Hatake Kakashi. The Jonin, on the other hand, wasn't in the least surprised. He stood there, waiting to be dismissed, boredly scratching the scalp behind his forehead protector. It was a warm summer evening, and the humidity was irritating. Also, that retard Urahara was simply not shutting the fuck up. It seemed like he had a huge pretentious monologue prepared for every possible situation in his life. Will you close that mouth of yours for just a little while, Urahara? We're all damn pissed off now, you little swizzle shit. At least Yoruichi was on his side. Shursui's death was actually a revelation, but it really wasn't necessary for the geezer to make such a big deal out of it. Yeah, you tell him that, and we'll see how he emasculates you both. The voices inside his head spoke simultaneously. Kakashi gave the most solemn look he could manage. It wasn't that much of a challenge. He simply replicated his face when he had read the death of Igarashi Tora in Aika Paradaisu. That scene always gets me sad and contemplative. At least the Sandaime seemed mollified. Wait. Make out paradise? Urahara was back. Both Kakashi and Yoruichi sighed. 15 seconds. That's how long we got him to shut the fuck up. Now that the sandy-haired pervert had gotten hold of this news, he wasn't going to let go. You're dismissed. I need some time to think what this implies. With a crisp bow, Hatake Kakashi left the chamber. Closing his mental ears, so to speak, he tried his best to ignore the laughter in the background, as the two idiots read the chapters off his memories of them. Creepy how they can do that. Naruto KKK-kun. It was only the first day of training, but Hyuga Hinata was in paradise. Seeing her Naruto-kun in that absolutely risque black, sleeveless undershirt, sweating profusely as he fought Itachi-san in a hand-to-hand battle really got her freak juice flowing. She'd almost orgasmed for the second time when he deftly blocked Itachi's thrust with his elbow, and delivered the finishing strike with a confident, cocky smile. To her right, Uchiha Sasuke was definitely having the exactly opposite experience. Seeing the familiarity with which the two read each other's moves, and the extent to which the Uzumaki was above him in skill had caused a direction in the usually self-confident Uchiha. She could actually see lines of fuming heat above his head, as they watched the two go at it. Time! Itachi called. Naruto stepped back, not even breathing heavily. The silver bracelet on his wrist glinted in the mid-morning sunlight. It's a different article every time Hinata had noticed the silver. Sasuke stood up like someone had lit a fire under him. Not even glancing at the heiress for her permission, he stepped forward for his turn. She didn't even notice him treading over her. All she had in her mind was her oh-so-cool Naruto-kun. After that time she'd followed him into the woods, he'd been surprisingly open about it to her. He described the secret training him and Itachi had done, deep in the forest, where no one would find out. And she'd accepted his answers at face value, because that's what she did. Uselessly enable everyone around her. I hope you get along well with Sasuke-kun, Naruto-kun. Uchiha Itachi observed his little brother approach, with embers smoldering in his eyes. It was the first time he'd been so fired up about anything, let alone training. For his ability to grasp everything in an instant had instilled a sort of dispassionate behavior in him, which Itachi had not gotten around to beating the shit out of. Now was his chance to do so. He looked at Naruto. The sweat-soaked Jinchuriki made eye contact, and gave the slightest of nods. The two brothers got into position. In an instant, the match had begun. The younger of the two siblings got to work first, directly going into the most ferocious of offensives. A spinning jump kick, followed instantly by a jab with the right palm, he emulated the swirling torrents of a whirlwind. Keeping himself spinning, he lowered his center of gravity. Jumping and locking both his knees straight, he rose steadily, fist already clenched. Itachi simply brushed away his advances with a callous, bemused smile on his face. If this was the best Sasuke could come up with, despite his great talent, then he might as well give up. The elder brother suddenly blocked a kick with great force, so much that Sasuke was sent back, stumbling. His eyes were wide with shock. After the spar with Naruto, this fight felt meaningless and mundane. Itachi saw it, though. The deep smolder in his younger brother's eyes, one which suggested that he was serious now. His mind left the task at hand, and began to wander, exploring deep, dark recesses in his mind, dragging out fond memories. Not that way, doofus! Oh really? You're the doofus! You're an idiot as well, Nai-chan. Sheesh, why won't you listen to me, Sasuke? A kunai is this. The thing in your hand is a shovel. Ni-chan, you fool! This is the real kunai, not your fake one. As he reminisced, he noticed Naruto looking at him. Ducking under yet another futile, weak punch, he caught Naruto's gaze. The Uzumaki gave the slightest of nods, imperceptible to everyone but those used to seeing it. Itachi's smile widened, now almost splitting his face in half. Taking a quick few steps back, he settled into a defensive position, awaiting Sasuke's next move. As Sasuke advanced steadily, Itachi willed out as much chakra as was humanly possible. His eyes first turned the typical deep crimson for the Sharingan, and then the dark comma-shaped spots in the irises swirled, merged and transformed into a three-bladed scythe. Itachi saw his brother's eyes widen with shock, and then totally go dead, as he launched his most ferocious genjutsu onto him. Tsukuyami. Orange and black. Time. Oh, the slowness of it. It's clawing at my soul. Pressing, digging its long, menacing talons right into my throat. I can't bear it anymore. It feels different. The pain, that is. It's more like a sword now. Like it's being drawn out from a sheath. Wait. The sheath is me. I am the sheath. Blood. Dripping. Oozing. Pouring into the endless hole in my soul. Why won't it end? Why? Why? The steel feels cold. Deathly cold. It's sliding out, slower than a glacier, more painfully than a saw ripping my muscles. My hands seem stuck. More than just stuck. Immobile. Unmovable. Blood flows steadily from the new orifices in my body, ones I did not have before. More blood. Or rather, the same blood flows, and flows again. This constant cycle has infested my brain. When will it end? When? When? The sound of shattering glass somehow familiar, comforting. I can sense the fragments falling around me. Except it isn't glass. Ice, rather. Cold. Oh, so cold. My body's freezing. There's going to be a blizzard coming down soon. The fight is over. I have nothing more left to give. Will this ever end? Will it? Will it? Hi. Hinamori! Sasuke screamed and sat up. Eyes bulging, pupils dilated, he remained unresponsive even as his Nai-chan held him by the shoulder and shook him. His eyes were blurry with tears. His right hand had been clawing at his chest. There were tears in his sweater, and deep, bleeding furrows showed through the ripped fabric. He'd nearly torn his heart out, judging by the depth of the nail marks. He drew a large, shuddering breath. His mind was racing, utterly blank. What just happened? What in God's name happened? One moment, he was about to fight Itachi, and the next, he was sprawled here, blood streaming from his self-inflicted wounds. His mind was a whirl, spinning round and round. The only explanation was that his brother had done something to him. It wasn't one he was ready to accept, not now, not ever. Not my Nai-chan. Not him. Sasuke! His mind exited its reverie, as he heard that flaming, irritating voice again. Eyes refocusing, he glared at the figure in orange and black that was looking at him with clearly feigned concern. A small twitch to his lips, as though they were voluntarily being held back from curving into a smile, told him all that he needed to know. This was Naruto's doing. Definitely. His heart ached again, but this time, it was for vengeance. Never before had he felt such burning hatred for another person. Sure, the Sasuke hater camp loved to gossip about his innate fear and distrust of women in general, judging by the way he treated them, but hate was never a word associated with the Uchiha prodigy. I hate you, Uzumaki Naruto. There was a deep calm to his thoughts now, a sense of justified rationality. There was no mistaking it. I fucking hate you. The late afternoon sun was giving everything a warm afterglow. Everything was lit up in a sort of golden hue, shining in the slanted rays, giving off shadows which merged and split off each other, like a crisscross spider's web. It was the perfect setting for some practice. Naruto Shikamaru scratched his head in annoyance. This is just so freaking boring. Why does Dad want me to do this? It was at the specific behest of Naruto Shikaku that his lazy, reluctant son had come here, to the training grounds at this ungodly hour, to fine-tune his ninjutsu. He formed the seals, and a slightly darker shadow spread across the lazy, idyllic landscape. He split the shadow into the same web he saw that existed in the field. Training this technique required increase in both duration and area covered. It was a rapid drain on his chakra, like someone had just removed the plug in a smallish bathtub. Sweating profusely, he controlled his shadows, doing the movement and stretching exercises his father had taught him a few weeks ago. Training is the most important bit when improving oneself, especially when it comes to our special ninjutsu. His father's words came back to him, recollections of a distant, foggy memory. The efficient use of chakra is far, far more important than the sheer volume you utilize. Remember, smart work beats hard work any day of the year. Sheesh, Shikamaru had sighed out loud. Do you have to use these retarded cliches, Dad? He resumed his training, unaware of the person watching him with detached amusement. To be fair, he was invisible to all but whom he deemed worthy. He fiddled with the blades of grass under his palms, silently laid out on the grass, enjoying the beautiful evening. Quite nonchalantly, he plucked a single blade, and put it in between his lips. It even gave him a jaunty, rakish appearance. You know, people don't usually respect those with such relaxed, rural habits, a voice spoke from behind him. Without opening his eyes, he let the blade fall, slowly releasing it from his mouth. Giving a small smile, he continued watching the young teenager, who had produced the most exquisite lace-like pattern on the meadow. Very well, Naruto-kun, he replied, voice almost a whisper. What would you rather have me do? I suppose playing the fiddle is certainly out of the question. The blonde-haired boy sat down next to him, and gazed out over the scenery. His azure eyes seemed to have a small sparkle. I suggest you continue with whatever strikes your fancy, he replied, in the same polite, nonchalant tone as before. Aizen Sousuke continued to keep his eyes closed, and his mouth shut. He hadn't had his fill of enjoyment from this amusing little village yet. There was quite a ways to go. Hate was an addictive emotion. The more you immerse yourself into it, the more you start to crave. Uzumaki Naruto craved for even more still. The boy was like an endless well into which he gathered all the negative emotions he could possibly fill. Malice, hatred, jealousy, pride. Oh, he could fill everyone else's need and still not feel the difference. A very interesting case. Their next act towards acquiring all that coveted hatred wasn't to begin for another 3 hours. Aizen's mind switched from the present to the past, going over their highlights, so to speak. Their masterpiece, he still felt, was how they had managed to gain the Uchiha genius allegiance. The mind rape they'd achieved then was something Aizen would remember for a long, long time. There was still quite a lot left on their agenda. Naruto-kun was probably the perfect instrument for that. I shall not be disappointed again, I believe. I believe in the hate they bear towards you, Naruto-kun. The blade of grass left the man's mouth, and drifted lazily onto the picturesque landscape. It was well past time. Where the fuck is he? Yamanaka Ino fidgeted with the hem of her skirt, trying to keep her expression neutral. It was a massive effort not to burst out in anger and storm away. The blonde was going to regret this, sure as all hell. He was an hour and a half late. Kami-sama only freaking knew why she was still there. He'd specifically asked her for this. Now he himself was a no-show? Oh, the nerve. There was a flash of movement next to her, a sudden shadow that seemed to shift, apparently on its own. She looked at that point for a second longer, slightly freaked. Nothing else happened. Maybe it was just her imagination. She'd been having a lot of these incidents lately. The feeling that someone was watching, following her everywhere she went, observing every minute of her day with stalker-like stealth. She'd begun to look over her back more and more often during the day. Her stupid, lazy teammates weren't helping at all. Sure, Shikamaru was capable, but all he said when she told him about this was boo freakin' who. She'd felt like tearing that piece of shit a new one, but what Choji had said after that was even worse. Don't just ask your boyfriend Sasuke to protect you, he had managed in a whole minute, munching on those stupid potato chips as he said it. It would suffice to say that those chips weren't the only thing Choji loved that had crunched that day. Anyway, the fear and nervousness was returning fast. She rubbed both her arms. The evening warmth had come and gone, leaving her wearing only a tank top in the chilly wind. And that bitch was still not here yet. Another minute, she decided. Then it's curtains, Naruto-kun. She hated her utter lack of self-respect, but what was to be done? Naruto-kun was just someone she found extremely hard to say no to. It wasn't like he asked her for stuff very often, so this must be important. A glint caught her eye. The chain hanging down over the deep black undershirt caught the moonlight. It shone bright silver, just like it did during the day. He was finally here. Giving the Jinchuriki her most hateful stare, she turned and looked away. He approached, and suddenly the presence vanished. She could physically feel the tension flow out of her body as her heart rate slowed, and her breathing got less anxious. She kept facing away from the blonde, putting on a fine farce of sulky ignorance. He had the grace to look embarrassed. My apologies, Ino-chan. Somehow, she felt she'd heard him say that exact phrase before. Déjà vu. He waited for her to nod, and continued. I was delayed by Sasuke-kun's rather sudden hospitalization, I'm afraid. Ino's heart literally stopped beating. For the Yamanaka still held a considerable amount of concern for her ex-significant other's well-being. Yes, she hated him, but not to that extent. What happened? Naruto seemed melancholy yet stoic. At this point, he existed solely as a shoulder to cry on. It was an unforeseen training accident. Sasuke was having a sparring match with our Jonin-sensei, when he mistimed his evasive maneuver. Although his wounds are not very serious, he was hit quite close to his heart. The kunoichi was silent. She just held her breath. Please let him be fine. Naruto's eyes actually looked a little downcast. He is recovering right now. It seems that there will be no lasting damage. I really hope he gets better soon. Ino was surprised by the sincerity in his voice. Frankly, from his recent behavior, he had come across as a little distant. Especially when she'd seen him during the time before the genin tests, when he'd handed that cocky son of a bitch his ass on a silver platter. Also, during and after the examination, Naruto always seemed like someone who gave no fucks, and didn't expect any to be given about him, either. Naruto fingered the chain around his neck. Anyway, I am most certainly sorry to have kept you waiting like this, Ino-chan, he said, with the debonair grace of a panther. Looking into her eyes, he flashed a smile. There it is again. Ino noticed the dull, opaque glint she'd seen during the genin tests. It was getting less frequent with time, but sometimes, when he looked into the distance, there was still the sparkle of hope in his eyes. Hope that something would change, that something would rescue him from the soulless abyss his life had become. She felt a pang of regret. All she wanted to do was take him into her arms and... The producers regret the direction the story's taking, so we're going to skip the hormonal blonde's wet dream. On with the good stuff. Shaking her head, she dismissed the last 5 seconds of fantasizing from her mind. Ino-chan? Naruto was waiting for something. Dimly, she remembered him asking her something. She nodded her head like a dumb farm animal, unable to recall the question. Naruto let out a small chuckle. You never cease to amaze me, Ino-chan. His expression suddenly changed into a far more solemn one. He said the next line in a husky whisper, almost in an undertone. You're as sly as a fox. Ino. Dim lights marked the entrance. Late evening had settled in, and the flower shop was closed. A shutter closed somewhere, in the distance. Konoha was closing for the night. The blonde boy next to her was the only other sign of life. Ino-chan, he implored. His eyes were brimming with tears. He did not want to be alone, not today, of all days. Not on his birthday. She glanced at him again. Her heart went out to him, given his sorry state. Bruises and cuts marked him from head to toe. For as long as she knew the blonde, he'd never not hurt himself in some way or the other. He's just exceptionally clumsy, was all her mother would tell her. As she stood there, looking into his cerulean eyes, her mother's call came again, more insistent this time. Ino. Naruto had begun sniffling quietly. For as long as she knew the blonde, he had never cried. Not in front of anyone anyway. As she stood there, unable to decide whether to go home and leave him here, or ignore her mother and stay with him, the decision was made for her. A rough hand suddenly held her shoulder, pulling her into the front doorway. Let's go, Ino. It's late enough already. Her father's face seemed worried. The way he kept looking at Naruto, all the while taking her away from him insistently, made her mind up. As she struggled to escape the hands holding her, she stared right into the blond boy's eyes. He held the gaze for a second, then looked away. It was not until the door had almost closed in front of her did she glimpse the first tear fall. "So, Ino-chan, where do you want to go for dinner?" Naruto's voice broke her out of her reverie. She shook her head, trying to focus her thoughts. Ramen, I suppose?" she mumbled. "Yes. Ramen would be good." As she followed the blonde to Ichiraku's, she stared at his back, wondering what had just happened. Did I know Naruto-kun back then? Did I really? With a massive crash, the decapitated tree hit the ground. Dropping his arm, Uchiha Sasuke, too, dropped to the grass. He wasn't sure how many hours had passed since he last ate. Or rather, he didn't care. There was but one thing on his mind. One person, in fact. And that one dickbag was going to get his fair share of pain. He lay there, huffing like a panda in heat. Sweat covered his bare upper body. A few rivulets of it were getting dangerously close to soaking through his bandages. A little more, and the brine would seep right into the not yet healed furrows in his chest. Eventually, it would lead to crazy, mind-numbing torture if it happened. But he didn't give a damn. Taking another deep breath, he hyperventilated, driving the lactic acid out of his muscles. Rising to his feet, he concentrated. Activating the Sharingan in a thoroughly weakened state such as his was no laughing matter. A full minute later, his irises began taking on the dull crimson hue, a testament to the bloody history of the famous dojutsu-wielding clan. Let's take it again from the top. Starting his motions again, he swept through the dense forest, pretending the trees were an army of shinobi. He had to resort to such loner-level training because his traitor of an Aizen had ditched him for that blonde Nimrod. Blonde. That sent another spike of rage, and his punch, initially intended to lightly tap the trunk, went clean through. Again, in a similar result, the tree fell. He'd seen his brother's Sharingan change for an instant. The second before he raped him, Sasuke had noticed the 3 commas swirling into a scythe-like shape. He had to know how, for the accompanying chakra burst was outrageous. Now that he knew where his brother's loyalties lay, he had to work that much harder in order to sway him. His spar had been a major humiliation. He'd not landed a single hit, despite his constant effort. That was, in all likelihood, his last session for the day. As he flopped back down onto the grass, he couldn't help but feel a sense of grudging respect for his archenemy. He had, after all, stood against the Uchiha Itachi, and held his own superbly. His thoughts drifted lazily, and his mind began to wander. My. What do we have here? All the rage was back. Jumping to his feet faster than most would have believed possible, he searched around for the source of that voice. He knew that voice. Its very deceptively calm nature, all too similar to that of his nemesis, sent a chill down his spine. The Uchiha prodigy spun on his toes, trying to catch a glimpse of the face behind the voice. All that remained before him was empty, hollow forest. The leaves made small crunching noises below his feet as he sprinted around the entire area of the forest. He simply had to know. Glancing frantically, his sense of calm began eroding, an altogether frequent experience for the stud boy in the last few days. Finally skidding to a halt under the leafy canopy of a clearing, he fought to catch his breath. Clutching a low-hanging branch like flotsam in a whirlpool, he gasped for air, trying to drive the fear out of his mind. He had never been as confused, befuddled and plain afraid as he was right then. His eyes kept darting left and right, trying to catch a glimpse of the unknown person calling out to him. It suddenly dawned upon him that he had exhausted all of his chakra while training. There was no recourse but for taijutsu. Come closer. Jumping violently, he whipped his head around. This time, it had come from behind him. This person certainly wanted to fuck with his mind, whoever it was. Show yourself, you worthless piece of scum! He screamed to nobody in particular. Willing out every last drop of chakra from his system, he forced his Sharingan to activate. No matter how dire the situation, he was invincible as long as he had that. Nothing. Not even a smidgen. As he searched his surroundings, the natural chakra sensing technique he was employing wasn't having an effect at all. And yet, the unknown voice resonated in his ears, teasing him, provoking him, calling him ever so closer. With a sudden effort, he shook his head violently. Distancing his mind from these unnecessary distractions, he forced himself to get back to his training. Resuming his stance, he began. As he worked up his 7th sweat of the day, his mind kept niggling him with doubt. Somewhere inside, he felt that the voice didn't exist. It probably had been a figment of his imagination, an illusion his brain had conjured to make him continue training. A mere hallucination. He paid no heed. Anything that got him back on his feet and start training again was justified. Placing the object of his loathing in front of him, he entered a one-legged spin, pretending to decapitate the piece of shit. Exiting the movement more perfectly than ever before, he hopped and skipped forward, testing out new attack combinations with increased ferocity and speed. His overworked, sleep-deprived consciousness began to fade, bringing up the past like a slowly growing haze. Random memories arose, some unbidden, some not. The flowers were out. Sakura flowers, he recalled. As he held his mother's hand to cross the busy street, he felt a surge of fear. What if he let go? What would happen then? His tiny hands grasped his mother's outstretched finger ever so tightly. No. That would never happen. His mother would never let go. Looking out from behind her, he couldn't help but feel giddy with happiness. For today was the day he started on his path to become a shinobi. He recalled his euphoria, his excitement. Matching his emotions, his movements slowed down, fluidly transforming from one motion to another. The very image of poetry in motion. They soon arrived. The gates of the academy had seemed much smaller in reality. As his mother opened the gate, he heard footsteps behind him. A single child ran towards them from amidst the chaos. His blonde hair glistened in the sun, the excess water dropping out as he sprinted over to the open gate. He remembered his mother's grip tighten that moment, as if in fear. Somehow, that sight didn't scare him in the slightest. Rather, it filled him with a vision of the very freedom he so desperately desired. Freedom to leave the walls of the enclosure. Freedom to run about the village, jumping across buildings like the grown-ups did. The kid suddenly looked at the academy gate, an expression of pure mischief on his face. Running towards it with a massive head of steam, he jumped. Vaulting the 6-foot gate with ease, he spun in midair, flashing him with a toothy grin that seemed to split his face. He felt a sense of wonder as he observed the kid. He was definitely someone his own age. Maybe he too was coming here, to the academy. Maybe they were going to be classmates. He could be the kid's friend, perhaps? His exhilaration reached its peak. The day could not have started any better. His motion began to resemble a whirlwind coursing through the depths of the deserted forest. The Uchiha began to reach into the depths of his unfathomable potential, as new ideas, new patterns began unveiling themselves in his mind. He was invincible now, with his Sharingan, and the conviction that his nemesis's back was in close range. Nemesis. He recalled a second shuffle of footsteps behind him as the kid ran on, entering the main doorway of the academy. A guy dressed in the standard flak jacket of the Konoha elite raced towards the gate as well, shouting to the mischievous brat who'd casually escaped his watchful eye. "Wait, you little upstart!" he yelled. "Wait, Naruto-kun!" His body suddenly spasmed. His reality crumbled in front of his eyes, like a bad painting being torn apart. It was replaced by the same scene that had ended all 6 of his previous training sessions. Orange and black. He began hyperventilating again, his body spiraling out of his control. Before he knew it, he was back on his back, lying down. His heart beat painfully inside his torso as he drove away the last dregs of the insane hallucination from his head. Another felled tree lay before his panting body, seemingly a result of his recurring panic attacks. His fingernails, usually manicured to perfection, were now a bloody mess. His chakra had run out halfway through his movements, causing him to physically dig through the tree trunk, clawing at it haphazardly until it had finally crashed down. He lay there, too tired to even try to dissipate the cloud hanging over his thoughts. He knew what would happen. The cycle seemed endless. There seemed to be no way out of it. And suddenly, there it was. Number 8 begins, he mumbled to himself. "Come to me, Sasuke-kun. Come." Sunlight. Yamanaka Ino awoke. She had somehow managed to return to her own bedroom, Kami only knew how. The slanting rays of the early morning sun gave a pleasant warmth to her entire body. Yet, deep inside, she felt the frigid chill of uncertainty. What, in heaven's name, did I do yesterday? Her head seemed muddled, like someone had hit her really hard with a baseball bat. Whatever in the world is this baseball? She'd often wondered. The blonde-haired kunoichi stumbled her way to the wash basin, and splashed some cool water on her face. Some of the fog surrounding the events of the last day began to unravel. She'd first met Naruto-kun, and then they'd gone for dinner at Ichiraku's. Ino tried her best to search for more details, but to no avail. Ino! The voice belonged to her mother, a mixture of worry and concern. Shuffling her feet reluctantly, she opened her room door and began to make her way downstairs. She felt exhausted, quite like the day Irika-sensei had made her and Sasuke run 100 laps of the academy building for sneaking a kiss outside of class as he was teaching. Oh, that had taught them a lesson all right. Sasuke had not been happy about it, but it wasn't her job anymore to give a damn. Stumbling a little on the last step, she finally reached the dining room. Her father was also there. She might have gotten a week's break from being a genin, but his work never ended. He was one of the major contributors to the village's security. The combo of him and the lazy Chode Shikamaru's dad was quite the strong wall of protection from which Konohagakure benefited in its entirety. Seeing his daughter enter, he put down the communique he held in his hands. Meal times were for family, her mother always insisted. Plopping down onto the wooden chair, she waited for her mother to ladle out the morning porridge. Fidgeting with her fingernails, she racked her mind, trying desperately to remember what had happened the previous night. Somehow, the mood in the room did not fit the usual breakfast scene. Inoichi should have customarily begun to ask for his bento. He did that every morning, as soon as he was done with his paper. His mother, too, did not have the air of haste around her. It seemed like the two of them were way more laid back than usual. The general air of unease was making her nervous. "What happened, Dad?" she ventured. From previous experience, the blonde knew that her father wouldn't respond immediately. He needed a little coaxing. When he remained characteristically silent, she opened her mouth to ask again, when it finally hit her. The angle of the sunlight was all wrong. This wasn't the usual time she woke up, it was closer to late afternoon. She would be having a late lunch. Also, her father wasn't at work today. He never missed a day. That was his pact with himself, and the village's safety depended on it. Something must be seriously wrong. Ino watched silently from her seat as her mother came up and placed her hands on her father's shoulders. Eyes widening with fear, she kept looking at both their downturned eyes, searching for answers. "What happened? Tell me," she implored them. Her mother seemed on the verge of tears. Ino felt a lump in her throat. "Was it something I did?" She mentally beseeched them to answer her. To tell her what had freaking happened. Something. Anything. "I think it's time, dear," Inoichi said to his wife. Her mother nodded, wiping away a stray tear from her eye. Ino was flabbergasted. She'd never been ignored like this in her entire life. Suddenly, on a whimsical thought, she pinched her arm, trying to test if it was a dream. The sharp sting was proof enough. This was real, she was real, but her parents were acting otherwise. Waving her arms desperately, she tried to catch their attention. "Why can't you hear me? Why won't you? Mom! Dad!" Her cries got increasingly frantic. The two suddenly gazed at the clock. It had just struck 3. Behaving as if Ino didn't even exist, her father walked out of the room, a little to the left of where she was standing. A solitary tear fell from even the battle-hardened veteran's right eye, soaking into the tatami matting. Ino's mind was spinning. She did not understand one whit of what was happening. Was she being ignored, or did she simply cease to exist? Her panicking mind decided to try again to establish her presence. Walking up to her mother, she screamed in her face. "Mom! Can't you see me?" She gave away no sign that she'd heard. Not even a glance towards her daughter, nothing. As she was slowly walking out, not even trying to hold back her tears, Ino bodily blocked her way, spreading her arms. "I won't let you pass, Mom! I won't!" Ino, too, had started crying, as though the fear and confusion had finally reached a peak and broken that invisible dam. Still keeping her glistening eyes facing the ground, her mother too sidestepped her, rushing out of the room, from her left. The kunoichi was distraught. As she followed her mother out of the dining room, a subtle smell of incense caught her nose. That was extremely weird. There was no need for incense in a flower shop. It emanated from the living room. Something in her subconscious told her to give up, insisting that she investigate this instead. She slid back the door and stepped inside. What she saw was indeed frightening. A small alcove had been made in the far corner, almost like the outline of the house had been changed for that very purpose. It contained a very ornate arrangement of fresh flowers, placed on what looked like part of the mantelpiece in the foyer. Almost hidden completely by the flowers was a picture frame, above which the incense stick hung. Dreading it even as she was doing it, she moved over, peering to get a better look at the framed photograph. She knew who it was, but her laconic mind refused to believe it. It was her image. She remembered the photo. It had been taken right after she'd become a genin, just last week. Ino remembered the pride with which she'd brought back this exact snap from the developers, excited to show her mother exactly how beautiful she looked in front of the camera. Much better than old Pinky, for sure. Her wide forehead did manage to shine exquisitely in the flashlight, though. The depth of her predicament brought her right back to reality. Looking at the arrangement of flowers, with one chrysanthemum kept in the centerpiece, she recalled her mother's lessons. 1 chrysanthemum for every year of remembrance until the 5th year, and 6 total for every anniversary after that. Keep that in mind, dear. You'll be a very good florist someday. Ino gulped at the conclusion. She didn't even need the calendar on the adjacent wall to tell her it was 1 year past her death. By now she'd begun to suspect that this supposed reality wasn't actually real. The genjutsu she was under was very elaborate, she had to admit. But the consistent pattern of alternating left and right parodies had already alerted her. Plus, the sudden discontinuity between sitting on the chair one moment, then standing at the doorway of the dining room was also a dead giveaway. The fact that her mother had acknowledged her existence in the beginning, as had her father, before suddenly ignoring her was proof of the technique's sheer weakness. It was like the user had not even thought the illusion through, choosing to improvise as it progressed. One thing had become clear: someone was testing her. There was no doubt about it. A real genjutsu cast with malignant intentions would not have such retarded flaws. Not even if the caster was a complete nincompoop. As the illusion began to fade, Ino couldn't help but feel curious about the date of death this faggot had assumed for her. It couldn't be too far into the future. Her parents didn't look much older than they did now, and the picture inside the frame looked recent. Glancing over, she managed to read it off the page as the wall dissolved in front of her face. November 26th. With a sudden leap of her heart, she realized that it was 3 weeks from then. She forced her eyes to close and her heart rate to slow down. She prepared to spring out of whatever situation she was in and give her attacker/tester a good whack in the nads. Again, she awoke in her bed. As soon as her eyes opened, she checked for more inconsistencies, which might be the effects of auxiliary genjutsu. She found none. The time was correct. It was 7 in the morning. Scanning the entire room for the chakra residue of the attacker with a technique taught to her by her father, she realized an attempt to locate or identify the culprit was useless. As for chakra usage, there were no signs or special signatures. There was actually a startling lack of chakra in her room. She must have dreamt the whole thing on her own. But there lay the problem. It had been too real to be a dream. The pinch, the detailing in the design of the shrine in the alcove, it was almost like something had augmented her dream, providing her sleeping brain with the necessary details. But then again, that would involve a lot of chakra usage, and a lot of chakra residue as a consequence. Also favoring the dream theory was that she'd seen the mantelpiece as the shrine. Reproducing the same design from memory wasn't very hard for the brain to do. All this was starting to give her an early morning migraine. Sitting back on her bed, Ino began recollecting the events of the previous day, and gave up as the headache cranked itself up a few notches. When I find out who did this to me, that bastard shall realize the true embarrassment of pulling his own underwear over his head. Ino, are you awake? Her mother's voice came up from below. It somehow mirrored the exact emotion from her dream. Getting up quickly, she screamed a yes in reply and sprinted down the stairs. She knew that it had been a genjutsu, but the desire to talk normally with her parents overpowered all else. Skidding to a halt in front of the dining room, Ino was hit by a sudden sense of déjà vu. The room looked the same. Her mother was cooking the same porridge, her father reading the same communique. Except that the date on the cover was correct this time around. Why didn't I just check the date on the paper? She mentally chastised herself for being a fucking imbecile. Her dad put the paper down and looked over at her. "It's time, dear," he said to his wife. The feeling of panic arose again. Had she failed to exit the illusion? Did it restart somehow? She didn't want to live through that again, not so soon after it had happened. "Dad?" She managed through a constricted throat. It came out as a constipated squeak. His eyes moved over to Ino. "Ino, go get changed." Relief spread through her entire body. It was as if someone had cut the tension with a knife. She exhaled deeply, emptying her lungs. "What's wrong, dear?" Her mother had noticed her reaction. "Nothing, Mom," she replied. Turning back to her father, she looked at him, waiting for him to continue. "Anyway, go change." Her father's voice was solemn. Her mother too seemed subdued. Into what? She wondered what was going on. The whole atmosphere had a wrong feel to it. This, too, wasn't how she expected her morning to start after that magical date with Naruto-kun. Wait. What? Magical? Dim recollections of the previous evening rushed through her subconscious. The whole picture was right there, under the turbulent surface. If only she could dispel the ripples, maybe she could remember what had transpired. Something somber. Black, preferably, her mother interrupted her train of thought. We are going to a funeral, after all. Ino's head whipped around at that. Looking at her mother incredulously, she asked, "Whose funeral, Mom?" The lack of any discernible reaction meant it wasn't immediate family. But the importance attached to attending the event meant that the deceased was like family, or at the least a close friend. You know your classmate Shikamaru? Her mother began hesitantly. Ino nodded. It's his father. The blonde kunoichi was stunned. The ticking of the wall clock punctuated the silence periodically, as Ino stared back and forth, from her dejected father to her distraught mother. What the hell? He stirred. Awoken so abruptly from his slumber, Naruto Shikaku took a while to answer the insistent calls of his bladder. Shaking his head frustratedly at this nighttime interruption, he walked over to the bathroom. Modern plumbing had not yet made its way to the Nara household. Clutching his gi around himself, he made his way over to the outhouse. Finishing his ablutions, he re-entered the moonlit landscape, and saw exactly what he was expecting. Uzumaki Naruto stood in front of him. The pale lighting cast a shadow over his eyes, obscuring them entirely. A stray moonbeam found its way over to his exposed canine. He had on his most innocent smile, but that solitary tooth ruined the image. Enhanced it, rather. For tonight Naruto wasn't the easygoing, debonair 13-year-old genin he often portrayed himself to be. Tonight he was the assassin, ravenous for the touch of human game. Inside his calculating mind, Shikaku had already considered and eliminated every possible escape strategy. There was no avoiding this. For even the mighty Shursui, the Uchiha prodigy, with his multitude of skills and sheer ability had fallen prey to this vicious hunter. It was no surprise that he knew who the culprit was. Shikaku's surveillance and defense strategies were the actual backbone of the village, despite him and Inoichi never claiming any credit for it. Naruto's tongue flicked out, passing over the sharp tooth. His smile widened. His prey suddenly felt another presence close by. Shikaku got a mental image of an older adult male. Unlike Naruto, his clothes and visage were refined, regal even. He imagined the mastermind's brown hair move in the stiff summer breeze, a lone strand playfully dangling over his forehead. A slight change in his killer's smile told him that his time had come. Be well, Shikamaru. I have taught you that which is necessary. Make me proud, my son. The silver band on Naruto's wrist glinted suddenly as he made a quick motion with his hand. Nara Shikaku didn't even notice the kunai approach. Before he knew it, it was wedged and his force of impact pushed his limp body backwards, and the famed tactical genius crumpled on his back. The weapon dislodged itself as his head touched the ground, and a crimson layer of blood began spreading onto his face. Approaching the corpse warily, as if expecting some sort of resurrection, Uzumaki Naruto maintained his smile. Kneeling on the well-trimmed lawn, he closed Shikaku's eyelids, sliding them over glazed eyes. The implement had made a diamond-shaped hole, right in the forehead. Judging by the bloodstains on the blade, it had gone a good 5 inches into the skull and brain. Gripping the kunai with his right hand, he lifted the still wet blade up over his mouth. A tantalizing drop of blood had formed on the pyramidal steel tip of the weapon. Closing his eyes, he extended his tongue underneath the drop. Waiting for it to fall on its own wasn't even an option anymore. Uzumaki Naruto gave it a little coaxing. Just a small tap on the handle. The drop, too, gave up its hold on the cold steel, falling right on his outstretched tongue. A voice drifted out from behind the blonde Jinchuriki. You have made it into quite the ritual, I see. Aizen's mellifluous voice floated over to his eardrums, now sounding like it came from every direction at once. Naruto didn't even turn. His lips merely curved into the same casual smirk he wore on his face at all times, around those sniveling retards. It is very intriguing, this obsession of yours, Naruto-kun. The two were now face to face, all of a sudden. Naruto Shikaku's body still lay there, blood soaking into the grass. So is yours, Aizen-san, he replied subconsciously. So is yours. The mood at the funeral was simply dead. Hatake Kakashi picked his nose through his mask. It was not an easy task, but what could be done? He stood alone, right at the edge of the procession, observing the general crowd. Many had chosen to take useless time out of their already insipid lives to attend this pathetic sham of a funeral. Nobody actually felt sad, or bereaved. Nobody except the obviously mortified wife and son of the deceased. Her bawling would not stop, no matter how hard he tried to tune it out, it still rang irritatingly in his head. I wish this were over. Or that I was the one who's dead. Oh, stop being a drama queen, Yorichi Shihoin popped in, contritely eloquent as usual. The time for games had ended. Overtime as well. The three bemused spectators shared a mental nod of the head. It's time for a confrontation. The funeral procession happened without incident. A completely worthless ritual, this. As Uchiha Sasuke watched on, he let a massive yawn slip. It had been almost 3 days since he last slept properly. His mother glared at him, her displeasure made obvious by the disapproving frown on her face. It wasn't his fault that he was tired and close to passing out. Even now, the insanely persistent voice was still calling him, urging him to come hither like some sort of extreme gay gigolo. It was hard enough to tune that thing out, and he wasn't able to pay much attention to the things around him. Clinging to his arm was the ever-present Haruno Sakura. Maybe the disapproving stare had been for this unnecessary display of affection, and not his tardiness. She had gotten a little more clingy than usual today. She was torn between holding on to her boyfriend for support, and consoling her blonde childhood friend-turned-love rival for the loss of a very important family friend. Today, Sasuke had no time for her crap. He had begun to see less of her ever since the genin teams were split, but that just meant that she got progressively more possessive and controlling in the little time they got off together. It had been barely tolerable before, but her wide forehead was becoming more and more obvious by the minute, and just as aggravating. Don't do this, he mused. Losing another girlfriend to his sudden whims and fits would not bode well for the Uchiha genius. Especially after what happened with Ino-chan. Sasuke was sure he didn't have a Sakura-esque backup in case this one failed. The ceremonies were over. As the final goodbyes were said, Sasuke walked off, bored out of his mind. The pink-haired deadweight on his left arm didn't even feel real at this point. His entire body was numb with fatigue. Those last dozen sessions had left him stripped of enthusiasm. The world seemed monochrome and devoid of intrigue. For no matter how much he pushed himself, he could only achieve what Naruto had done with a calm, clear mind. Even the almost fluorescent color of his girlfriend's hair seemed rather bleak this day. The villagers attending the funeral did not mind his behavior. He actually was the only one there who looked as if someone had died. As he turned onto the main village boulevard, Sakura in tow, he heard a very minute, plaintive voice behind him. Turning, he saw Hyuga Hinata looking back at him, a specter of worry in her lavender eyes. Oh, what in God's name does she want now? Sasuke-kun, it seemed like her speech defects were reserved only for the blonde moron. Although the three were in the same team, they rarely hung out together as a group very often, or at all, in fact. Sasuke and Naruto couldn't be kept in the same place without a heated, one-sided argument erupting between them. It usually culminated in Naruto simply ignoring the Uchiha's rants and calmly sitting there, with that fake smile plastered onto his face, silver necklace glinting in whatever light there was available. If you do not mind, Hinata continued, could we have a word in private? The tinge of red on her cheeks gave away the topic of the upcoming private word to both the prodigy and his pink-haired lover, although their interpretations were far different from each other's. I do not want to discuss that retard's problems one more time. Sorry, Hinata-san, but I'm not giving any more fucks about this. Wait. Asking my boyfriend for a private conversation in my presence? Just how bold has this bitch gotten? Oh no, you can't. Both of them replied simultaneously, then looked at each other, pleasantly surprised at this sudden consensus. Oh, but the heiress wasn't done trying. Sasuke knew what was coming. No one could resist her puppy-eye face when she chose to use it. And the couple was no exception. 3 seconds of soulful staring later, Sakura shook her head, muttering it must be about Naruto under her breath, and let go of Sasuke's arm. I'll see you later then, Sasuke-kun, she said, before ambling haughtily away. The two genins watched her leave, expressions of relief clear on their faces. Sasuke turned back to the Hyuga, the obvious question visible in his stare. It's about the murder, Hinata said slowly, looking around for eavesdroppers. She didn't have to worry. The road was empty. Sasuke's ears pricked right up. This was interesting. Finally, she wasn't whining about her failed love life. I went there to Shikamaru-kun's place a few hours after the incident. Hinata's face was earnest, a mixture of excitement and worry. I searched for chakra residue in the garden with my Byakugan. I managed to see a faint trace of a foreign chakra which... Whoa, lady! Give me a second. Sasuke could not deny now that the heiress had his full-fledged attention. So you went to the Nara compound, at night sneaked around past the security to check out traces of chakra, all in order to investigate a murder. Hinata nodded, not catching on to his surprise. Fuck me in the ass, what is the world coming to? Sasuke was intrigued. Did you recognize the traits of the chakra? Anyone we know? He contained himself. The poor girl wasn't very forthcoming to begin with, and his interruptions weren't helping. I could not place it, but I had seen this chakra somewhere before. Hinata hesitated. It was a few days back, I think, when I was following. She blushed and stopped talking. Following whom? Spill it, lady. Sasuke was nearing the end of his tether. It was already pretty frayed, and if this Hyuga woman toyed with it any more, his head was going to explode. Whom were you following? Please let it be who I think it is. And Naruto-kun, she stuttered. Sasuke's eyes shone with a renewed vigor. It is strange that no one else in the village seems to know about this, Hinata continued, but the Uchiha had already stopped paying attention. The evidence was circumstantial at best, and there was no way to confirm that it was, in fact, Naruto's chakra. Hinata noticed a malicious glint in Sasuke's eyes. It wasn't Naruto-kun's chakra, she said, enunciating his name clearly this time. All of a sudden, Sasuke was drawn back from his land of magical revenge fantasies, back to reality. He looked the heiress directly in the eye. She didn't look like she was lying. Also, Hinata would not have approached Sasuke if the killer had been the blonde. She would have confronted Naruto herself, like a useless dope-retarded moron, and gotten herself brutally murdered as well. So you say, Sasuke wasn't completely convinced, but he chose to believe her, for the moment. Do you want to investigate this further? He added. Hinata nodded her agreement. Somehow, the thought of partnering with this hesitant yet resolute girl didn't seem repulsive anymore. He almost relished the opportunity to be away from Sakura for a little while. Well, let's discuss this when my girlfriend isn't glaring daggers at me from behind that corner over there. Sasuke finished this little encounter, turning away and walking towards Sakura's hiding spot with slow, measured steps. Just you wait, you faggot. I will get you screwed over so badly in this, you shall rue the day you dared to blow that kiss at me. He glanced back at the Hyuga, who seemed disoriented again now that her purpose had been fulfilled. I have sincerely no idea how this chick will head the Hyuga clan during her time anyways. This little recon mission with her might not even be boring. Not that I even like this damaged broad as a girl anyway, he consoled his ego. She's like a lost cat, desperate to be looked after. I smell it. I can feel it, Uzumaki. I'll take you down, and your own little girlfriend will help me do it. The leaves rustled loudly. A strong wind had begun to blow, a wind that had signaled great beginnings and endings in the past. This was no ordinary squall. It was an omen, a foretelling of great renown. For this wind had no source, it began as abruptly as it ended. It was almost like it had a will of its own, choosing to appear only before those it deemed worthy. The two people enjoying it had done absolutely nothing to deserve a heralding as grand as this. They hadn't even lived long enough yet. And still, the majestic breeze blew across their faces, caressing their hair, playing with their clothing. Perhaps it was due to the other entities present there that had caused it to happen, perhaps not. Hatake Kakashi adjusted his mask, drawing it over the bridge of his nose. His face was impassive, despite the smile on his companion's face. The wind was tousling Uzumaki Naruto's hair quite a lot more than Kakashi's gray mop. The Jinchuriki had on his standard smile, insincerity dripping from every pore. Their gazes were locked on, as subtext flew in a continuous stream between the two. It's a pleasure, like always. The blonde broke the silence, choosing an arbitrary exit to the silent staring and mental conversation. There was no need, really, or such an unnecessary sentence, but speaking first meant that Naruto had subtly challenged Kakashi to reply. They both knew why they were here, without a doubt. Naruto had gone silent again, and the stalemate continued. Something had to change, else what was the point of this carefully planned, cliché encounter? The breeze still rushed past their faces with an unparalleled enthusiasm. It was like it hadn't finished what it had been created to do. Again, the blonde acted first. It wasn't very noticeable, but he changed his smile, just a fraction. The overall effect it had on his expression was tremendous. It now looked innocent as a baby, so pure and warm. He could probably rattle off any of the cheesy, perverted pickup lines from Ika Ika, and totally get away with it. That face is just too darn OP. Yoruichi-san? Kisuke chimed in. Hearing that infernal tone of voice, the Jonin groaned internally. Something extremely lame was going to be said, and he was simply not in the mood to receive it well right now. Did you know? Like my Zanpakuto, I too released twice. And with that, the wind disappeared, to probably never return again. The dramatic tension of the scene was broken, like a balloon being popped. Exiting his prolonged face palm, Kakashi resumed his pointless staring match with the blonde. To Naruto's credit, his smile hadn't wavered one bit. It still stretched the entire width of his face, almost splitting his face in two. Slowly, reluctantly, the intensity returned, like a cat approaching a saucer of hot milk it had just gotten burned on. I believe we appear to have reached an impasse, Kakashi scratched his forehead. Just because something had to be said did not make it any less awkward to say. This relentless cliché dropping was beginning to bore the three others in the conversation. They were definitely alone in the forest, and for some reason they weren't. I suppose so, Kakashi-san, the blonde replied in an emotionless voice. What now remains is to discuss what can be done here to resolve this rather unfortunate difference in opinion that we seem to have. The last part was clearly aimed at the two figures slowly materializing behind the Jonin. The woman who'd just taken shape was stunningly beautiful. Kakashi himself did a complete double-take upon seeing her, not having witnessed her human form until this very day. Clad scantily, it almost seemed like someone was playing a cruel transformation trick on his eyes, a cruel one indeed. Although the sudden enthusiasm had died once he saw the sight next to her. It was a very famous saying that Kami-sama made all people beautiful. It definitely wasn't true in Urahara's case. The actual cruelty of a deity, if such a thing existed, was seen manifested in its full glory in the ugliness of the green-clad retard standing next to Yoichi. Wearing an obviously out-of-style green hat, he seemed to exude this air of clumsiness and uncertainty that even Mado Guy couldn't top. No surprises there, Kakashi mused. I guess personalities do match appearances after all. Kakashi-san? Naruto's smooth, gentle voice prodded him. The Jonin whipped his head back, returning to their confrontation. It seemed as though the two behind him were visible him only, and the blonde didn't perceive their existence. Chuckling a little to hide his embarrassment, he made a gesture with his hand, pointing in the approximate direction of the village behind him. I really do not care what your motives are. Seriously. He glanced right into Naruto's eyes, searching for some emotion, any emotion at all. The population of the village is your playground, so amuse yourself as you see fit. Naruto's right eyebrow rose quizzically. Whatever do you mean by that, Kakashi-san? The smile suddenly gained a dangerous edge to it, a sense of something being held back, bridled by the fake composure on the Jinchuriki's face. Kakashi stifled a gulp. This was going to get very messy if he didn't handle the next few minutes with extreme care. I mean, your antics with Sasuke-kun have become the talk of the village lately. He hastily corrected the direction of the conversation. I mean, for you two to become lovers in such a small time frame is nothing short of fateful, he finished, quite awkwardly. His words had slipped out of his mouth without thought, and Kakashi regretted his lack of self-control in such occasions. The same thing had happened the other day with Kurenai-san, where an offhand comment about her pregnancy, and something related to being chubby had set off an explosion. She's quite the feisty one. I can see why Asuma would want to hit that. Returning to the present, Kakashi noticed that the murderous glint had again left the 13-year-old's eyes. I see. He began, voice still collected and neutral. Could you remind me as to what the purpose of this meeting is? With a single line, he had brought it back to the uncomfortable zone again. Kakashi himself had begun to wonder as to why he had come here in the first place, why he had sought out a confrontation such as this so early in the game. We're simply testing the waters, remember? Yoichi chimed in. To see what the circumstances actually are. Anyway, you'd better find a way to retreat, and fast. Kisuke sounded urgent. The longer it takes after this, the worse it gets for us. I wanted to congratulate you, Kakashi was very good at thinking quickly. For becoming a genin, and for receiving your first mission. The questioning stare was back. I failed to see why you are the bearer of such news, and not my genin team leader or my teammates. Naruto voiced the flaws in that shamble of an excuse, demolishing it in the span of seconds. Itachi is busy with work, I'm afraid, the Jonin was trained to feel nothing as he lied through his teeth. And therefore, the responsibility fell upon me to tell everyone in the team, including Sasuke-kun and Hinata-san. This is probably the most see-through bluff I've ever made. And that includes that time when I told Hokage-sama I got lost on the road of life when I was late for a meeting. Somehow, the blonde seemed to believe him. He saw it in the imperceptible change in his expression, like a sudden softening of the lines of his face. I thank you for your congratulations and your kind consideration towards Itachi-sensei. Perhaps we can have dinner together sometime? You could treat me to a little ramen, maybe? Kakashi nodded hesitantly, accepting the offer. Very well then. We shall bid adieu here and now. Turning, the blonde Jinchuriki made his exit. The Jonin held his position for a minute and a half, before taking a quiet breath. So, that was more than a little unsettling. You think? Yoichi was all up in his ass. It's why too early to come out guns ablaze like you did. Sheesh. You men and your retarded minds. Kakashi didn't even listen to that last part. Ika Paradise had mentioned such women in its gospel text as well. Beware of the so-called bitch. For these women shall cause your eventual downfall. Some side character had ranted thus at the hero once, if he wasn't mistaken. You surely aren't. Kakashi-san. Urahara's drawl was back too. Kakashi felt like taking a kunai in the forehead right now. At least then it'll be my doing. Undoing, rather. The rest of the forest seemed desolate as well. It was like the wildlife had sensed the imminent danger and chosen to save themselves. Ambling along without a care in the world, Uzumaki Naruto stepped on the buttress root of the largest banyan he'd ever seen. He marveled at the intricate yet extensive system the tree had used in order to ensure the continuation of its existence. Everything has fallen into this spiral precisely because of these bindings. These roots shall remain no more. Everything shall topple and fall, succumbing to the eventual chaos it was meant to descend into eventually. It couldn't hurt to reach that tipping point an instant earlier than usual, couldn't it? The handsome man had materialized again. Dressed in a simple kimono and Hiyori arrangement that gave him the regal grace of an emperor, Aizen Sousuke lay down comfortably against the trunk of the large banyan, arms folded behind his head. Quite the intriguing conversation you had there, Naruto-kun. The messy brown hair fluttered in the wind. I agree. Kakashi-san had some fine points to make. The blonde Jinchuriki raised his hand to his face. Slowly extending his tongue out of his mouth, he licked the silver ring he wore on his middle finger tentatively, and smiled. You may exit your hiding spot now, Itachi-sensei. Surely enough, the Uchiha legend stepped out of the underbrush. Cerulean eyes met jet black. Terminate? The word was said in an undertone, almost a whisper. The blond boy shook his head. Let him be for now. He too shall prove to be useful in his own little way. Gazing at the silently chuckling man lazing on the mossy forest floor, he sighed audibly. For now, let's just focus on doing what we're supposed to. Our genin team hasn't had any missions yet, correct? Yes, Naruto-kun, Itachi replied, face as empty of emotion as ever. So I suggest we perform some of them. Naruto wasn't even looking at anything in particular. No, his gaze had already begun spanning into the near future, devising these new, interesting variables into his grand scheme of things. 2 at the entrance, 2 at the back gate, 3 on either side. The compound is square, Sasuke-kun. That's a bitch. Too bad security wasn't this tight before the Nara kicked the bucket. Sasuke-kun. The Hyuga looked at him reproachfully at his highly disrespectful referral to the victim, Nara Shikaku. What? So you suddenly care about people after they're dead? You can't talk shit about them after they're gone? What about before? Didn't hear you saying Narasama this, and Narasama that. Hinata chose to remain quiet. The logic was terribly flawed, but there was a bitter truth behind it. The only time they ended up truly caring about people was after they were dead, sometimes not even then. Night had fallen. The stifled sounds of the 2 genin were masked well by the ambient sounds around the Nara compound. There was a palpable tension in the air. Getting caught, after all, would mean a whole lot of unwarranted trouble, especially so for the young Uchiha and heiress of the Hyuga clan. You used the Byakugan just now, right? Sasuke wanted to ease the tension. They had to wait a while. Security was progressively getting lax. There was a window where the shift of the current guards would end, and a new set would replace them. This window ensured easy entry into the compound. Yes. She was looking away, towards the moon. Sasuke stole a glance at her. She's thinking about him. He could tell. Are you? Could you be the one? He wanted it to be. It was a perverse desire, but he wanted to see Uzumaki Naruto blamed, punished. A fleeting feeling of guilt. I'm using this girl. Yet she seemed to know why he had joined her that night. And interestingly, she seemed to want to find out too. 3 minutes. Sasuke looked at her again, contemplating just how different Hyuga Hinata was now, as compared to her stuttering, blushing self in front of Naruto. You've ruined her. Now. They both moved simultaneously, a rare sureness in their steps. Sure enough, the guards who had finished their shift had walked away, and the next shift was nowhere to be seen. This way, he heard the girl whisper, as he followed. The moon was behind the clouds, ideal for the sneaking the 2 genin were doing. Stop, Sasuke-kun. Here, this is where. You felt the chakra? Sasuke dropped his guard, and let his eyes wander. They were at the entrance of the room. He didn't want to enter, and he was sure Hinata didn't want to either. He turned when he heard her whisper. Even under the weak lighting, he could make out that her Byakugan was in use. She didn't move, her body relaxed yet unnaturally still. The Byakugan of Clan Hyuga. Not much can boast of staying hidden under its gaze. It's there, it's still there, a faint trace of it, much lesser than last time. He didn't say anything. Instead, he closed his eyes. Just ambient sound. Trees, wind. He opened them, Sharingan blazing this time. It was always a powerful sensation, the rush, and when it died down, he could feel the Hyuga's hair move, he could feel her hand twitch, even though it was just minimal, he could feel. There. Something there. He pointed. Hinata moved in the direction, confused. Her Byakugan did not seem to have given her any feedback on this. She reached downward, her hands scrabbling across the wooden floor, until they touched something cold, metallic. There's nothing here, Sasuke-kun. Are you sure? Huh. He refocused himself, and mysteriously it was gone. It had in the first place been just a faint trace, he couldn't even tell if it was chakra, but something. Right. Sorry there. Just a little jumpy. That's fine, Sasuke-kun. They had both let their guards down. Hinata had dispelled her Byakugan, and Sasuke was about to drop his respective Kekkei Genkai too, when it happened. A single step, and then, he landed at the entrance. What's going on here? Who are you? Fucking shit sandwich, guards. They acted with hitherto unseen efficiency. The Hyuga moved out of the way, and his eyes met the guards. Just for a fraction of a second, the guard's lips widened in surprise, but all he could see was the Sharingan. He hadn't seen anything else, he hadn't seen the intruder's form, shape, nothing, and then, all was black. All was black, all was black, all was Blaya. You dare step into the Naruto's household, common guard? The guard couldn't see anything, but he knew he had to get the hell out of there real quick. It is I, Nara Shikaku. Now terror coated the guard's veins, he flailed, doing anything to get away from the source of the sound. I'm sorry, sir. I promise I'll never set foot in this house again. I'll never. You have displeased me. Help. The man stood, not caring what was happening, bumped twice into the wall, found the entrance on the third try, and was out of earshot within 5 seconds, off to tell everyone about Nara Shikaku's ghost. Meanwhile, a certain Hyuga and Uchiha were running, from what they couldn't say, but they were simply running, for they had almost gotten into a metric fuckton of trouble. It was a long time before they stopped, panting, a good distance away from the Nara compound. What? Genjutsu Hinata, I used Genjutsu on Sasuke-kun. I know. What was I to do? We would have gotten caught. He thought there was a ghost? Sasuke nodded, finally recovering. Yeah. Thought it was appropriate, you know. He was in the Nara household, and he could get haunted by the dead. He looked at her, certain of that she was going to throw his way for doing something that risky. A genjutsu on the guard who was protecting the household, after all. What Sasuke did not expect, however, was for the Hyuga to start laughing. She giggled before bursting out into full-blown laughter, which ended up making him laugh too. They both sank to the ground, still laughing at what they had just done, the fact that they'd escaped certain harsh punishment by fooling a guard into thinking he was seeing a Nara ghost. When Sasuke finally recovered, massaging his sides, he seemed to look at her clearly for the first time that night. Hey, Hyuga! What, Sasuke-kun? You're alright, you know, when you're not fawning over your Naruto KK. She got up too, aiming a punch at him playfully. Thank you, Sasuke-kun. You too. Well, see you tomorrow then, An. He looked towards her, a defeated expression on his face. There's one thing. It couldn't have been him. Being there, at the place, convinced me of that. He couldn't have killed Nara Shikaku. Thank you? Sasuke took a step towards the left, in the general direction of the Uchiha enclosure. Sure. Tomorrow, then. You always wanted control, Aizen-san, and you got it. You never killed without necessity. And yet, here I am, holding the anthill in my hand, but unable to track the movements of the ants. Thank you, Sasuke-kun. You too. It couldn't have been him. He smiled from his vantage point as he watched the Hyuga and Uchiha part ways. Sasuke Uchiha was a genius, but at times, he seemed to prove remiss. For example, Uzumaki Naruto was the only one that night to catch a glimpse of the glint that his necklace produced against the moonlight as it hung around Hyuga Hinata's neck. Although, I cannot say I am displeased with this course of events. Cannot say that at all. A mission? Uchiha Itachi remained impassive as his younger brother voiced his surprise quite loudly. Silencing him with a withering look, he continued. Under the Hokage-sama's directive, we are to escort a particular person to the land of the waves. Sasuke and Hinata's ears pricked up at the sound of that. Going out of the dark, confusing atmosphere of the village was a very exciting prospect. They had been dying for a chance such as this in the last week or so, and that chance had presented itself. Due to the rather special conditions regarding the strength of this team, Itachi went on, eyes drilling holes into the two genins. We have been given a C-rank mission right out the bat. I suggest you spend less time fawning over the details, and go back and prepare for the ordeal. Chill the fuck out, Nissan. An admonition from his brother wasn't going to bring his spirits down. Itachi's eyes had widened at that expletive, but he had said nothing. I don't think he has the right to say a damn thing anyway, considering how he's treated me over the last few months. Now, Sasuke-kun, Itachi, for all his composure, did a splendid triple take. Hinata hadn't stammered even one word of that last phrase. I don't think you should be talking to your older brother that way. Apologize immediately. Sasuke actually looked abashed. This was crazy. How in heaven's name is she doing this? Itachi's mind reeled with shock. I'm sorry, Nissan, the younger Uchiha prodigy said, although begrudgingly. Itachi nodded tight-lipped. This was not the time to show surprise at Sasuke's sudden maturity. Oh, seven hells, the XANBU Jonin groaned internally. Naruto had the tendency to step in at the worst times. I spy, with my very eye, a little, meek Sasuke-chan, who is going to cry, he said in a sing-song voice that inflamed Sasuke with the intensity of a katon, Ryusenka. Oh, you bloody faggot, his face was crimson for a different reason now. I'm going to tear you a new one large enough to fit. Stop it! Hinata's high-pitched scream rang out in the main courtyard outside the HQ. Naruto-kun, now you apologize to Sasuke-kun immediately, or else. Itachi was suddenly interested. Or else, huh? There it was again. The dangerous glint was back. Naruto seemed right on the edge of a precipice, one he was ready to fall off of in a split second. He took a step forward, menace coming out of every pore on his skin. The silence seemed heavy and unnatural, almost crushing. Or else what, Hinata-chan? The voice seemed to come out of nowhere, like a passing gust of wind had brought it from a distant source, only incidentally falling on the ears of the blonde Jinchuriki. Hinata still stared, a little hesitantly. She had not heard that voice, it seemed. He started. With an almost visible effort of will, he calmed himself. Closing his eyes, he bowed. I apologize for my earlier comment, Sasuke, he said, without a hint of emotion in his voice. His face was serene again, and his anger seemed to have passed. As he opened his eyelids, his irises shone with a newfound determination. Let us start the mission, shall we? Our assignment has arrived, it would seem. The three turned. And wrinkled old geezer faced them, back hunched over with age. He wore a massive backpack that showed that he still had strength left in his body, that his physical faculties hadn't left him. He had on a pointed hat that reminded Itachi of a weirdly shaped onion. His gray French-cut beard lent him the semblance of grace, the last remnants of his youthful visage. He took a towel off his shoulders and mopped his face with it, unsuccessfully so. He still looked like he'd run a mile and a half in a minute. Greetings, he started. His voice had a grating edge to it that annoyed the Uchiha Jonin a little. He seemed a little inebriated, and a little ill at ease, but his drunkenness wasn't the cause for it. Perhaps he had seen the previous encounter between Naruto and Sasuke, and perhaps he was concealing something that would come to light later. Itachi moved forward to shake his hand. My name is Tazuna. I believe you are the team who shall be escorting me? He had a very infirm grip, and he seemed distracted. He kind of looks like Hokage-sama. Uchiha Itachi. I shall be your chief contact, and these three here will assist me in assuring your safety. He looked back, turning to introduce the genins. They all stepped up to shake the old man's hand. I believe your assignment is to escort me until my village, in the land of the waves, and then protect my life with your own until I finish constructing the bridge, yes? Shall we get going then? The Jonin nodded, pointing towards the gate. As they exited the village, they arranged themselves into a protective circle around Tazuna, ready to ward off any mishaps. Itachi had a bad feeling about this mission. Somehow, with the old man not being as forthcoming as he should have been, and with both Sasuke and Naruto in close proximity, he felt this was all about to go down in flames. It just needed a spark. The very edges of his lips curled into a smile, imperceptible to all except those who were specifically looking for it. A spark I am totally willing to provide. Finally, you show yourself, Naruto. Sarutobi Hiruzen gazed intently into his crystal ball. The distorted images of the five leaving the village showed quite clearly inside the glass exterior. He had seen the entire exchange between them, watched as Naruto shed the layers of courtesy and blandness that he had blanketed himself with for the first time in years, showing that he was capable of emotion. And yet, despite a part of him being pleased that he had finally done so, the Sandaime wished that it hadn't happened. Somehow, in a twisted way, Naruto still being shielded had given him hope that something good lay underneath those strata. That once he actually showed who he was, the people would learn to recognize and accept him for the hero that he was. But he had dreaded the other result with just as much intensity. That Naruto had become a soulless cavern, a mere endless container for all the hatred thrown at him. Sarutobi had feared that the individual inside all that politeness had become corrupted, a mere puppet for the villagers to play with. What he saw in his crystal ball was completely different. For all the possibilities, Hiruzen had not considered this option. The fact that Naruto on the inside was merely Naruto. The willful child he had seen for an instant when Hinata had provoked him was like the Naruto of old, immature, juvenile and simple-minded. He was the child Hiruzen had been holding his breath to see, the exact sort of legacy Namikaze Minato would have wanted to leave to the village he loved. Somehow, the Hokage was not convinced. It all seemed too perfect, like the last 3 years of change and withdrawal were merely to be ignored. It felt like the 13-year-old blonde was showing him this side on purpose. Maybe it was all part of a major scheme, which was all held together by Hiruzen's assumption that the Jinchuriki hadn't changed. 7 hells, what am I thinking? The Sandaime chastised himself for being an overthinking fool. Not that Naruto wasn't acting weirdly, but to suspect even his usual character of being a charade? This had gone too far. In his concern for the Uzumaki, the old man had forgotten himself. He lay back on his chair, massaging his temples gently. He recalled the day this all started, the one time his pupil asked him